Hello friends, welcome to another video, and this one is a very exciting one because today we are doing a book versus movie about the Hunger Games. And I don't think I even need to introduce the Hunger Games because I can't imagine there's anybody who doesn't know what the story is. It was so huge, like 10 years ago and even still now. I did read all the books when they came out and I have watched the movies, but honestly it's been like 10 years since I even read the books. So I was kind of going into this blind. I knew more about the movies than I did about the books, so it was kind of really interesting to get back into this world and to see the things and the little details that changed that I completely missed and I completely forgot about as I've grown away from the original story. And the thing is, going into this video, I wasn't really sure how I wanted to go about it, just because usually I tend to come at these kind of negative. I go into the stories thinking about all the ways that I can be critical about how they're different, but I feel like the book and movie are pretty similar for all of them, which is rare. It's very rare that you get 3 books that have actually decent movie adaptations. And of course, there are little things that change that everybody's going to have issues with, but for the most part, I would say these books and movies are received very well. So I was a little bit intimidated about making this video because I didn't want to go into it so overly critical and then find out that there's not really anything to criticize. But I think after reading the book, after watching the movie, there is still plenty to talk about. Not necessarily because the movie was bad, but just because there are differences and it's fun to notice the little changes and maybe to consider why one thing was chosen over another. So today we're going to be comparing The Hunger Games, the book, to the movie, which of course I'm going to start off with my usual disclaimers for this type of video. For one thing, if you're interested in The Hunger Games, if you haven't watched or read it before, I highly recommend doing that for yourself before coming and watching this video. Go form your own opinions, but more importantly, have a good time experiencing the media and then come back and we can talk about it here. Second, everything that I'm going to say in this video is my own opinion or based on my own observations. So there's for sure going to be things that I miss, things that change that I just didn't catch on to, or maybe things that I had pictured from the book that aren't correct, but I'm still talking about it because it's how I envisioned it. Just little things like that. Like, this is all for good fun, you know? So I'm not going to hit every mark and I'm probably going to be wrong on some things, and that's fine. This is all just how I experience the book and movie. And then the third thing, of course, is that books and movies are completely different mediums. You are making 2 different stories that have to be told in different ways. Especially when you get a book like this where so much of it is reliant on the main character's inner monologue and the thoughts that they have the entire time. You can't possibly put all of that in a movie and still retain audience attention. It's just not going to work like that. You have to make changes and then consider how can you still get the message across without directly telling the audience everything. So I am well aware that you're going to have to make changes when you're making a movie. And just because I'm pointing out differences doesn't mean that one is necessarily better or worse than the other, or that the movie wasn't accurate and therefore it is a bad movie, because that's definitely not the case. There's always going to be changes that need to be made when you're doing book to movie adaptations. So again, this is all just for good fun. We're not taking anything too serious here. And of course, The Hunger Games is a trilogy. There's Catching Fire and then there's Mockingjay after, so hopefully we will be getting to those soon as well. Okay, so we're just gonna get straight into it with The Hunger Games book. So The Hunger Games book starts off with Katniss waking up. Her sister Prim is having a nightmare. And Katniss says that it makes sense that her sister would be having a nightmare because today is her first reaping day. And it's important to note now and to keep in mind that throughout the entire book, you're getting everything through Katniss's point of view. She's the one narrating everything, so you get to know a lot about her relationships just like in her own head, and everything that she thinks about the world and how they should be reacting to the different things that are going on. It's all coming directly from her head, and obviously that's going to be a huge thing that we are missing in the movie, but just know that like a lot of this early stuff is just what she's looking around and thinking about. She describes Prim as being lovely, that her mom used to be beautiful, and then they have this super ugly cat named Buttercup, which Katniss has a little feud with this cat, but Prim loves it, so it gets to stay. And we learn that Katniss actually initially tried to drown the cat, but Prim was so sad and begged for her to not do that and to let them keep the cat. But the reason she's worried is because it's another mouth to feed. So we're getting to learn a little bit more about how Katniss's role is in this family and maybe how she has to take care of things and she has to worry about stuff like that. She gets dressed to go out hunting and she grabs some goat cheese that Prim had gifted her for Reaping Day. And then we watch as she's walking through District 12 and she's talking about how usually around this time you would be seeing all of the coal miners going to work because District 12 is the coal district. They are the ones that go to the mines. and this is why she no longer has a father, is because he died in a mining explosion. But typically around the time that she's awake, they would be going off to work. And today, reaping day, the streets are silent. There is nobody out because reaping day is kind of this big event, so everybody's just going to stay inside and wait until it's happening. And she says that their house is by the edge of the seam, which is like their area of the district. And beyond an electric fence is the meadow, which they're technically not supposed to go into, but the electric fence is only occasionally charged because there's so little electricity out there, so she's able to sneak through most times. She crawls through the fence, and then she goes hunting, where she was taught by her dad, before he died, how to use a bow and arrow and how to hunt in the woods. And she learned how to hunt when she was around 11 so that she could make money and provide for her family by selling whatever she could hunt, which she'll go and sell at the black market. And while she's out here, she's thinking about how she used to be a lot more openly critical about the capital and about the way that things are running. The capital being the people that are governing the districts. They're kind of the top tier, and then you go District 1, District 2, all the way down to 12. So the capital is the one in charge. They are the wealthy. And she used to be a lot more critical of them, but she has since learned to keep her mouth shut, because if you talk badly about the capital, or if they hear you, or if there's any hint that you don't like what's going on, they might get you. She doesn't want to get any trouble for herself or for her family. She doesn't want anything to be taken out on them. So she learned how to just behave, do what she needs to do, and get through another day. And then while she's out hunting, she meets up with her friend Gale, who is another member of District 12. He's also out here hunting to provide for his family. He brings out some bread for them to split, and then they also gather some berries, and they sit and have like a makeshift picnic out in the meadow as they talk about the reaping and as they talk about how terrible the world is, because Gale is a lot more openly critical about the capital and about the way that things are being run. And he's a lot more willing to sort of question the authority that they're following. And right away, you can kind of get the sense, especially because we're talking about a YA 2010 book here, that this is going to be some sort of romance or something, but it's very much one-sided. So Katniss, she describes him as, he could be my brother. And, it's because they look similar, because they all live in a similar place, but also, you wouldn't really describe your lover like that, would ya? So from the start, you very much get the idea that Katniss is not into Gale, but it kind of seems like he might be into her, just with the way that he's talking and like the things he's talking about. She goes a little bit into everybody's appearance, where everybody has black hair and olive skin except for her mom and Prim, who both have blonde hair and lighter skin. And that's because Katniss's mom came from like a better part of the district, but she came to this area for love for her dad. And Katniss doesn't really even forgive her for that decision. There's a lot of tension between her and her mom. And this is one of the reasons why, is because Katniss's mom could have had a much better life and could have been able to provide a lot more, and instead you get the situation where Katniss is being forced to take care of everything in this really bad part of the world. But she tries to be understanding, and she tries to sort of flip her mindset to see why her mom might have wanted to give up everything in the name of love, right? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. They talk a little bit more about the reaping and going into the Hunger Games, and Gale says that he wants to run away together. He's like, we could do it, we could survive, like we know how to hunt, we know how to be out in the wild, we could just keep on going, and they wouldn't catch us. But Katniss points out the obvious, which is that they are the two providers for their families, so as soon as they leave, their siblings and their mothers and, their whole families rely on them, so they can't just up and leave. And then that sort of leads them into talk about wanting kids, wanting to grow up here, have a family, all of that stuff. And Katniss straight up does not want kids. She doesn't want to bring anybody into a world that is this way, which is understandable because things are really bad. But Gale, on the other hand, says that he wouldn't be opposed to having kids if they didn't live there. And Katniss says, well, we do live here, so too bad, I guess. But she's kind of interested in why he's even bringing up kids in the first place. Like, why does he want to talk about this with her? Because it kind of seems like, again, it feels like there's this like romantic tension with him where she doesn't feel the same way as he does. And we'll see that play out as the story continues. But they finish up hunting. They go to the black market to sell their meat and to sell everything that they got. And then they also stop by the mayor's house because he specifically wants a type of meat that they had caught, so they go to him. And while they're at this house, the mayor's daughter Madge answers the door, and she's all dressed up nicely for their reaping, and she makes a comment that Gale doesn't really like. She kind of makes a side comment about, I think, how she's dressed up nicely as if she could be going to the Capitol, and Gale responds by saying that she doesn't have a lot of entries in for the reaping, so she will almost definitely be safe. She's not going to be super affected by anything that goes down today. And this is where you kind of learn more about what the reaping is, what's actually going on in this district, where every year from the age of 12 to 18, you are entered in this big bowl of every name from the kids in the district. And then on reaping day, one boy and one girl is chosen to enter the Hunger Games. But the thing is, if you're poor, which you probably are if you're living in a district like this where they have so few resources and they're just not being taken care of by the people that could help them, like especially this far out into the districts, they're just not really thought about by the Capitol. They're not really taken care of on any level. But if you want to provide for yourself or for your family, you can put yourself in another time, add another entry with your name on it, and that will give you like grain and oil rations for 1 year for one person. So when you're 12, you would only have one entry in. When you're 13, you would only have 2 entries in, and so on up until you're 18. But if you're putting your name in more times to try and feed yourself and your family, your chances are getting a lot worse, aren't they? So for example, you have Katniss, who when she was 12 had her name in once because it's her first year, and also had to put her name in 3 more times to try and feed herself, her sister, and her mother. So now on year 1, she already has 4 of her entries in. The following year, it's the same thing. She's adding 4 entries instead of just the regular 1. So now at the age of 16, she already has 20 entries in the pot. And even worse than that, Gale is 18. He's been feeding 5 family members for 7 whole years. So he has 42 entries. 42 chances to get picked to go into the Hunger Games. Your chances are already high if you're 18 because you've been in the reaping all of those years, but to be adding that many extra chances, it is just such a scary thing to think about. And it's such a terrible thing that these children are being forced to do so they can feel like they're helping their families who don't have enough. So Gale is understandably mad when Madge makes a comment about how she might go to the Capitol, and he's saying, well, yeah, but you don't have really any chance of going because there are people that are a lot more likely to be picked. And I will say, I really like the self-awareness that the book has, like where the characters are so direct in calling out why the Capitol might be doing things a certain way, where it's saying that, Gale is mad, not necessarily at any individuals, but at the system that was created, because he knows realistically that it's not Madge's fault that her name is in less times than his. That has nothing to do with either of them, it's just a result of necessity. They don't really have a choice. Madge is better off, so she doesn't need to put her name in. Gale has to help his family, so he has to put his name in. But he points out how the system is created in a way to where the individuals in the district will feel resentment towards each other rather than at the system itself. It creates this lack of trust where all of the people in the district feel resentment towards each other, and they feel like it's a competition just to beat the other people rather than seeing it as us against the Capitol that's making us do this in the first place. They're all so worried about making it through another day that they can't begin to group up and fight back, which I fear is a little too real. Katniss goes back home. She gets dressed up with a blue dress that her mom offered from like when she was a kid or something. It's a special dress to her, and she offers it to Katniss, and she braids up her hair. And Katniss tells Prim, hey, this is your first reaping, like you only have 1 entry, and I'm not letting you put in any tesserae, any of the extra entries. So realistically, you have such a low chance of being picked right now. You only have 1 out of the hundreds of people that are probably in this pot. She helps Prim get dressed. She tucks in the little back of her shirt and says, tuck your tail in, little duck, which that line will come to haunt us, I fear. And then the 3 ladies head off into the, district center, the town center, which usually is a nice place, and it's usually, kind of fun and kind of inviting. At least it could be, but today, the vibe is awful. The vibe is terrible. There are camera crews up on top of the buildings, and everybody is depressed. Again, understandably so. They absolutely should not be feeling joy with what's about to go down. And this is also the time where the Capitol is able to monitor the population of all of the districts, so just keeping track of everybody, because this is a mandatory thing. You have to be here. You have to witness what's about to happen. If you can't, they will go to your house and make sure you're either in your house and incapable of attending, or, I don't know, they're gonna get you. And then up on stage, the mayor and his daughter Madge sit with Effie, who is somebody from the Capitol. She has pink hair and a green suit on, and then there's also an empty seat next to them. And at this point, we hear a little bit more about what the games are, what are the Hunger Games at all, because this is the 74th Hunger Games. The ceremony starts with the mayor talking about the history of Panem, which came up after North America got messed up by a bunch of natural disasters. Panem is the capital, and then it's ringed by 13 districts. But they had the Dark Days, which is an uprising from the districts against the capital. And it ended up with the 13th district getting demolished because the capital kind of wanted to show them up and be like, hey, we actually control everything and there's nothing you can do about it. And after that, the capital made the Treaty of Treason, which gave them new laws to guarantee peace and to remind them that the Dark Days, or the rebellion from the districts, must never be repeated. It's a way for the government to say, hey, we control everything and you better not try and fight back against that. The rules of the Hunger Games are simple. In punishment for the uprising, each of the 12 districts must provide one girl and one boy, called tributes, to participate. The 24 tributes will be imprisoned. The tributes will be imprisoned in a vast outdoor arena that could hold anything from a burning desert to a frozen wasteland, and over a period of several weeks, the competitors must fight to the death, and only one will survive. And it's explained that this is the capital's way of showing that the districts are at their mercy. They can take your children and make them die, and that's just something you're gonna do, and you're gonna allow it to continue. And if you try and fight back in any way, they will take down your whole district like they did with 13. So for the districts, it's obviously a pretty terrible time where they're potentially losing their children to this fight that doesn't need to happen at all. But in the capital, it's this fun celebration. It's a period where they get to sit around and watch and enjoy the festivities. And because of that, the districts also have to pretend like they're having a good time. They're not allowed to show that they don't like what's happening because, again, the districts are at the capital's mercy. So if you start to show that you don't like being under the capital's rule, they're not going to like you very much. Act out in any way, and the capital will find a way to get ya. I know I keep saying that, but it's just true. The capital is so in control of everything, and it feels hopeless to even try, and that's obviously the environment that they worked really hard to create by making something so brutal so that it really is a reminder that, the districts are powerless. And Katniss explains that District 12 has only ever had 2 victors in all of the 74 Hunger Games. One of them, unnamed, we don't get to know anything about them at this time. The other is Haymitch, who is that extra seat up on stage next to Mayor and Effie. He lives alone in the District 12 victory space because it's just him. There's nobody else that has survived. So he's watched every other District 12 tribute go off and then die. And he lives alone, and he has a bit of a substance problem. He is drinking a bit too much, and he kind of becomes a joke for everybody watching. They feel like he's a bit of an embarrassment because he's not really much of a person to follow, I would say. Like, he's not admirable. It's not like he won and now everybody thinks he's cool. It's like he won and now he's just kind of cast to the side and he just goes to cope by himself. So he shows up late to this whole thing and he's already drunk. And that brings us to the actual reaping, where Effie goes up, ladies first, and she goes to pick a name out of the basket. And despite everything that Katniss did to try and protect her sister by saying she can't put in her name any extra times, it's only her first year, she should be completely fine, Primrose Everdeen is the name that's picked. And the thing is, it's not just Katniss that's upset by this, it's everybody, because it's very rare that a 12-year-old gets picked, and even rarer that a 12-year-old survives, because obviously they only have, hopefully, one entry in, but if they do go in, they're the youngest, they're the smallest, they're the least coordinated and prepared for something like this. So if you go in, you really don't have much of a chance. But as Prim is walking up to the stage, Katniss looks over and sees that her shirt is untucked, her little ducktail came out, and that sort of snaps her back into action, where she was frozen. She was so in shock and so upset by what happened that she couldn't even react. But after seeing Prim's little tail and being reminded that, like, hey, that's your sister, she runs up and she's like, hey, I volunteer. Everybody parts to let her through, and she jumps in front of Prim before she can walk up onto the stage and says, hey, I volunteer, I'll go instead. Which Effie is, like, not sure how to handle that, because volunteers are very rare, especially in farther out districts, because you have such a low chance of survival. Like, maybe if you're in District 1, 2, 3, you might volunteer not necessarily to save somebody, but more because you want to prove that you can win, like you've been kind of dreaming of coming back a victor, because those districts are a bit more wealthy and they're also just more prepared to go into battle, whereas somebody in District 12 is probably already starved, they're probably already, feeling the lack of resources, and all of a sudden they're being thrown into these games against people who have been preparing their whole lives. So typically you don't see people in the farther districts volunteering because it's basically a death wish. Katniss doesn't want to cry in front of Prim or really in front of anybody on the camera. She doesn't want the people in the districts or the people in the capital to think that she looks weak or that she looks like she's gonna go down easy or anything like that. So she holds back her tears, she tries to stay strong, and then Gale comes up, takes Prim, and walks her away so that Katniss can go up onto stage on her own. Effie tells the crowd, hey, clap, let's celebrate your District 12 tribute now, and not a single person claps. And Katniss is kind of caught off guard by this because it is, small, but it is still a sign of rebellion where this person who came to represent the games and the capital and everything like that is telling you to do something and you're all refusing. And then instead of clapping, they all silently hold up the 3-finger signal, which ends up being a huge iconic thing, but in the moment, it's just a sign of solidarity, and it's kind of a goodbye to Katniss because she explains that this is something in District 12 where it's usually seen at funerals. It's usually a goodbye to somebody that you love. And it's this kind of sign of respect. And it's just really powerful to see everybody in the district doing that instead of clapping like the Capitol wanted them to. Because you have to remember that this entire thing is being broadcast to everywhere. So to see something like that, it's small, but it's so cool. Because it's all of these small things that are going to add up to something much bigger later. Haymitch is close to Katniss, and he kind of makes a comment about how he likes her bravery for stepping up there and volunteering, but he's so drunk that he then falls off the stage and has to be carried away. And that sort of takes away he's an embarrassment to everybody. He lost all his cool factor because he's just falling around, he's messy. It's hard for people to take him seriously. But the thing is, this is the initial reaction that you have from Haymitch, where he's saying he likes Katniss, he likes her bravery, and then he looks up at the cameras at the front of the stage and he says, more than you. And it seems like he's, in this first time that we're seeing anything from him, he's directly calling out the Capitol for not being brave and for being cowards, forcing them to do any of this in the first place. They're cowards for not just being good authorities and for just acting like they can only win by having all the control over everything and doing all this evil stuff or whatever. So our first thing that we see from Haymitch is him potentially calling out the Capitol, which is a crime, but he's so drunk and he falls over and he's carried away and it's kind of not taken seriously. But again, it's those little things that add up. Not many people would be able to get away with calling out the Capitol like he might have been doing there. Katniss sort of reflects on the decision she just made, but ultimately she's happy that she decided to stay and that she didn't run away with Gale, because who would have been there to save Prim? If she had run off with Gale and she went to save herself, nobody would have been there to volunteer. So at the end of the day, obviously it's a huge decision that she just made, but she's happy that she was able to do it and to save her sister from the fate. And then Effie goes, she calls the boy tribute, which is Peeta, who's another person around Katniss's age. They've seen each other around, but they haven't really interacted except for one time where it was towards the beginning of Katniss trying to keep her family alive, trying to feed them, trying to provide resources. She was on day 3 of hunting, not going well, not making enough money, not able to provide resources. They're eating just boiled water for dinner, chewing on mint leaves to try and tell their stomachs that they're full, even though they are not eating anything. And she ends up going around the city. She can't find anything that's going to help them. She ends up outside the baker's place, but there's no bread to take from the trash or anything. But then she looks over to the building, and the mom, the wife of the baker, is yelling at her to leave, to not go digging through their trash or anything like that. But she's so weak, she would rather just die out here and not come back to her family and say that she has nothing to provide. So she is fully given up outside of this baker's place. She's getting yelled at, and then while she's out here, the baker's wife has gone inside, so she's out here alone, just given up on everything. And then she sees Peeta, this bread boy, who was behind his mom while she was being yelled at. He comes back out, and now he's getting yelled at as well because it looks like he has burned some bread, and she says it's not usable. How could you be so stupid as to make a mistake like burning our bread? Just give it to the pigs outside. And Peeta goes out and starts to give some to the pigs, but also throws some bread in Katniss's direction, which, is it possible that he burned bread on purpose because he saw Katniss and wanted to help her? Maybe. He throws her some bread, she puts it under her shirt, and she runs back home and actually gets to feed her family that night. So it's kind of a big deal. It's a very kind thing where he went into harm's way to give her something. So obviously, even if they don't know each other, he is a very caring person. And then after that whole incident with Peeta throwing the bread, spring comes. And Katniss is able to start finding food again and to start providing more. And she sees flowers blooming, and she kind of ties Peeta's kindness to this season of hopefulness where things are starting to look up. And she feels bad that this is where they reunite because she's always sort of felt like she owes him something, like he did her a favor and she never repaid it, and now they're gonna have to potentially kill each other. And the thing that's a hopeful thought, if you can even call it that, is that somebody else might kill him before I have to. And that's sort of what she holds on to, is this idea that at the very least it won't be her that does it. So the 2 tributes from District 12 have been chosen, the ceremony ends, and then peacekeepers take the tributes away to this big fancy room where they will have 1 hour to say goodbyes to whoever. And then after saying goodbyes, they will be taken to the capital where they'll start preparing for the Hunger Games. And again, during this time, Katniss is determined to not cry. She wants to look strong, not only for her family, but for anybody in the capital or anybody else who might be looking to her and trying to find signs of weakness, signs that she's already not going to win this thing. She wants to prove to people that she does have a fighting chance, so she's trying to stay strong no matter what, no matter who's looking. Her mom and her sister come into this room where they're saying their goodbyes, and Katniss immediately locks in, is like, here's what you need to do while I'm gone, because up until this point, for 5-ish years, she's been the provider for the household. She's been the one taking care of them. So now she has to break it down and say, hey, I'm not going to be there to provide food. I don't want you guys to be, dying while I'm gone. Prim doesn't hunt. She doesn't like hurting animals. She would much rather be a healer and help. So Katniss tells her to just focus on selling goat milk and goat cheese from her goat, and to also be trading and to work with Gale, and to just really rely on him as this extra resource that can help them find ways to make money. Obviously, Gale already has a lot on his plate from having to care for his entire family, but she trusts that Gale will be supporting them because he cares about her. And then she goes and talks to her mom and says, hey, you checked out when Dad died, and you can't do that now. You can't shut down. Prim needs you. Like, you have to be here. You have to support her. No matter what happens, you have to be here for her because she can't be here alone. She needs somebody. And Prim is trying to be hopeful about Katniss surviving, but there's kind of this general feeling that it's already over. Like, they are going off to die. Because District 12 just never wins. Like, what chance do they have? But Katniss is going to do everything that she can to try and win for Prim. Her family leaves. They've said all that they can say. And then, of all people, Peeta's dad, the baker, comes in. He brings in some cookies for her and then just doesn't say anything and just kind of sits there, which is obviously a kind thing, but it's a little weird because they don't know each other like that. He just kind of showed up. But then when he's on his way out, he says he'll make sure the little girl is eating. So even though they maybe don't know each other, this guy's going to do what he can to help out Prim and Katniss's family. It's just a really sweet thing from this guy that she doesn't really know at all. And then Madge, the mayor's daughter, comes in, and she comes in with urgency. She's going kind of quick, but she shows up with this little bird pin that she has, and she gives it to Katniss, and she says, hey, you're allowed to take one memory from home into the arena. Can you please take this? I don't really remember if there's significance to the pin before this, or if it's just a friend saying goodbye and wanting to offer something. But regardless, she runs in, offers the pin, and then leaves. And then after that, Gale comes in, and he, again, is locked in. He goes straight to giving her advice on how she can survive the Hunger Games, how she's a really great hunter, how she knows her way around, and how killing people is not that different from killing animals. And then while they're talking, the peacekeepers come in and tell them it's time to go. Gale has to leave. And as he's leaving, he gets cut off saying, remember I, and then that's the last we see. And I would assume it's a remember I love you type of situation. But Katniss does not really dwell on this in the slightest. They just move on because there's obviously bigger things going on right now. So then they're going to the Capitol. Again, Katniss has wiped all emotion from her face. She doesn't want to seem like she was crying at all. Peeta, on the other hand, openly looks like he was crying. His face is red and puffy. It looks like he's having a terrible time. And Katniss sort of wonders if this is a strategy of his where he's trying to play up that he looks weak and then he's going to come in really strong. And then they load up onto the train, which this is their first time on a train. It's going 250 miles an hour, which will make the trip to the Capitol take less than a day. And they're treated well in the train. They each have their own rooms with like a full bedroom, dressing area, bathroom, fancy showers. They have everything that you could need. She gets dressed and takes a closer look at the pin that Madge had given her, and she explains a little bit more about the significance of this bird and how it's something that was created by the Capitol to use in war, but it ended up being turned against them. And now it's sort of this thing that haunts the capital, where instead of being something that they could utilize, it's just this creation that could not be controlled. And the combination of the jabberjays from the capital and the regular natural mockingbirds led to the creation of the mockingjay, which it can't repeat human words, but it can copy sounds. So if you sing a song, the mockingjays can carry that tune. And then Peeta and Katniss go to have dinner or lunch, or they have a meal with Effie where she is trying really hard to be nice and supportive, but she keeps making these backhanded compliments where she's like, oh, you guys are eating so well, you're so clean while you're eating. I wasn't expecting that from people from where you're from. And it's meant to be kind of a compliment, but it's kind of rude to where they come from. So after that point, Katniss makes a point of eating everything with her hands just to kind of be like, take that. Oh, you think we're messy? Then we'll be messy. And then while they're on the train, they're watching the reapings throughout the day, and they're sort of taking inventory of everybody that they need to be keeping an eye on, just making note of the competition. And when the show gets to District 12 and you're seeing this district where you have the only survivor falling off of the stage, it's just kind of a messy place. The commentators are being really rude and talking about it like it's a joke. They're already undermining this place. When everybody in the district does the symbol instead of doing the clapping like Effie asked, they talk about it like it's, just this strange cultural thing. They try to brush aside everything that is significant in this district. They make it seem like they're just a bunch of jokes. Haymitch comes into this part of the train, but he is still throwing up. He's fallen over himself. And Effie says that he needs to get himself situated and that the tributes need to take him seriously because he is their difference between life or death. He is the one that's meant to be training them, and he's also the one that's supposed to be getting them sponsors, which are people that will send gifts in during the games. And Haymitch is the one that has to secure those deals. So if he is not being taken seriously, if he's falling over himself, he's incoherent, all of these things, nobody's going to want to work with him. So then nobody's going to want to sponsor District 12. So he needs to get it together. He needs to get serious about this if they want a chance at winning. And then while this is happening, he throws up on himself and Peeta says, oh, I'll go wash him off. I'll go take care of him. But this sort of sets off a red flag for Katniss where she's again worrying, is this kindness an act? Is he trying to make himself look sensitive and trying to make himself look so kind? But in reality, it's because he has this bigger strategy going on behind the scenes. She's caught off guard by all of this kindness, and so she goes back to her room and she throws out the cookies that Peeta's dad had made because I guess she just can't trust any type of kindness from that family. But the thing is, they fly out of the train and conveniently land on a patch of dandelions, which again brings her back to that day where Peeta threw her the bread and that time where she felt hopeful, and she associated him specifically with this feeling of hopefulness. And she thinks back to when they lost their dad and when she had to learn how to take care of things on her own and when she started to develop her confidence with hunting and with providing for her family. So it's this back and forth of emotions with her where obviously she's leaving behind everything and she's worried about the people that she's leaving behind because she has had to do so much for them, but at the same time she is capable of doing quite a lot, and it's possible that she has a fighting chance, but she doesn't know who she can trust because it seems like the people that are meant to be on her team are just not very respectful of them being tributes and going into this game to potentially die. Effie is just being rude towards them a lot of the time, even if she's not meaning to. And then Haymitch just doesn't seem like he cares at all. So it kind of feels like she's completely alone right now, but she still knows she has the ability to at least do her best. I don't know if either of these tributes are at the point where they think they have a fighting chance, but they at least know that they can try, and that's something. And I think that's a good stopping point for the book. So that brings us to the movie. So back to the beginning, back to the introduction. We are watching the Hunger Games movie. You see what the Treaty of Treason is, which is saying what Reaping Day is and why they do it. Again, talking about the uprising and the end of District 13. It's just text on the screen, but I think it is good to have that context to go into the movie and to know even why Prim is freaking out, because that's the first scene, is Katniss trying to comfort Prim while she's freaking out about Reaping Day. So it's good to see that and to already kind of know what's going on. And then right from the beginning, we also get a glimpse into the Capitol where Caesar, who ends up being this TV show host that we'll meet later, he is talking to Seneca Crane, who is not really a character in the book at all. But Caesar is this TV show host. He'll end up talking to all of the tributes when we get to that point. And then Seneca in the movie is the game maker. He is the person in charge of running the games, make sure everything goes smoothly and everything like that, which is still a thing in the book, but it just goes down a little differently. They're having an interview where they talk about the games and what it might be like this year, and they establish that this is Seneca's 3rd year running the games. And then we see Katniss try to comfort Prim as she's freaking out, saying that she's not going to get picked, it's only her 1st year, she has nothing to worry about. Prim asks Katniss to sing to her, and Katniss does it without hesitation, so I guess this is probably something that happens fairly frequently where Prim needs to be calmed down, and Katniss is there to sing her to sleep or whatever it might be. And then Katniss goes out, but when Prim asks, where are you going? She says, I just gotta go, without elaborating, which makes it seem like Prim doesn't know that Katniss goes out hunting, which it's not allowed to go out past the fence and to go out hunting, but I mean, I would assume at this point, with how long Katniss has been doing it and with how the family needs her hunting to feed themselves, that probably they all know what's going on. So if it's a matter of just not wanting to openly talk about it, that's one thing, but I think it's kind of weird that she's like being secretive with Prim as if it's any type of secret. And then as she's going out, she gets hissed at by Buttercup the cat, but for some reason this cat is black and white and the cat is supposed to be orange. Whatever, doesn't matter. There's an angry cat in the house. She leaves secretively on her big mission, and she's running through the starving district. You're getting to see people like hiding in their windows and all this stuff. And again, it's just not a great vibe. You can see that the people are worried, they're afraid. I'm not sure what they're exactly hiding from. They are allowed to go outside if they want to, so I'm not sure why they seem to be cowering in fear in their windows. But she goes running over to the fence. It's still labeled as high voltage, but she goes through with no problem, which I think it's interesting to put up a high voltage sign and then not explain to the viewer why she's able to go through no problem. And I guess we can just assume that it's because there's no power there, but why put a sign up then? I don't know. Not an issue because it is accurate. I'm just thinking out loud. And she goes out to this like fallen tree where she keeps her bow and arrows hidden. She was obviously secretive about it when she was talking to Prim, but it doesn't necessarily establish like what the rules are for hunting, what the rules are for leaving, how strict things are. Like it kind of brushes over any policy talk, really, and it's just she's doing stuff and it seems to be secretive, but I couldn't really tell you why. Without Katniss's inner monologue, without hearing something from a narrator, it's hard to tell just how severe everything is out here, how bad things are. And then Gale shows up. He does call her Catnip, which is a nickname that he has for her in the book because he misheard her saying her name the first time that they met. So it's like small details like that that is still cute that it translated into the movie. She was trying to shoot a deer and he shows up loud and it runs away. She's upset because she's like, hey, what'd you do that for? Like, I'm trying to hunt here. And he was like, what would you even do with that? Like, what are you gonna do? And it's like, come on, Gale, try to be a little supportive, especially if this is somebody who we find out you have this thing for. Like, why are you being rude to her? Why are you undermining her hunting abilities? And she tries to say how she's gonna sell it to the black market and to the peacekeepers because the whole thing is like the black market is allowed to run because actually that's how the peacekeepers, which are people that work for the Capitol, they get resources from that. So you're allowed to be doing these illegal things as long as you're not super upfront about it, because at the end of the day, everybody benefits. But he seems to be like, I would never do that. And she says, come on, you know, we both sell to the peacekeepers. And he says, yeah, but not today, not on Reaping Day, which again, I don't really know why it would be more of an issue today than any other day, because they always have peacekeepers around. So if it's just that there's more, or is it that they're more strict today? Or like, I don't know really anything about how things are run here. And that's, I guess, my main issue for the entire first part of this movie. And he also says that she shouldn't be hunting today because the forest is swarming with peacekeepers because it's Reaping Day. And then a hovercraft goes above and they have to like hide in the trees. And it's like, again, what do you mean the peacekeepers are out in the forest? Are they looking for people that are breaking the rules? Are they just out there because they need to exist in a space? Like, I don't know what that means. Why are they out there? If the peacekeepers are to assume that everybody is obeying the rules and is in the district, then surely they're all in the district. And if they think people are getting out, then they would be monitoring who's going in and out. Like, why would they just be in the forest? Or is that just like how they get to and from stuff, is by walking through the forest, even though there is a train station? Like, I don't understand why they would be out there. And they also don't see any peacekeepers out there. And I would assume if these two are both really good at hunting, they would notice if there's other humans walking around. So I don't get what that warning was supposed to mean. I don't really know what purpose the hovercraft served that was going overhead. I don't know what would have happened if it had seen them. I don't know why that hovercraft would even be looking for them, or if that was the peacekeepers trying to monitor the forest. Gale again proposes a similar idea about if they leave and like what if they just escape the games. And he also says what would happen if everybody stopped watching. If the games didn't even have an audience, then they would have to stop because there's nobody watching. But Katniss is very quick to say that that would never happen and just laughs him off. And the thing is, when he says they could run off into the woods, they could survive on their own, she says they would be caught and that the Capitol would cut off our tongues or worse, which we'll come back to. And then they still have their little makeshift picnic, even though I don't think Katniss has goat cheese from Prim, even though I'm pretty sure Prim does still have a goat because it's mentioned later, so I'm not sure why that wasn't included because it absolutely could have been. And it also makes the goat more relevant when they talk about it later in the plans for when Katniss is leaving, but whatever. Gale does bring bread, and it's a little surprise, and it's a little treat, like, oh, we actually get to eat today, rather than both of them contributing to this. And then Katniss asks Peeta how many times is his name in, and he says 42 times. So she says, oh, well, I guess the odds aren't in your favor, and then they leave it at that. They don't explain what that means. They don't explain really why his name would be in 42 times. They don't explain anything about the rules of how the entries work or the ages, really. They just say, oh, 42 times, and then they leave it at that. And it's like, if I hadn't read it, I would not remember that number. That number only stands out because they talked about why it matters. But in this, it's just like they say the number and then move on as if it's supposed to mean something. But at this point, we don't even know what the reaping is, so I have no reason to hold on to that number or to think that it's even exceptionally high. And then we see Katniss in what I would assume is the black market, and she's going around. She walks up to a person running a stand and sees this Mockingjay pin, and the vendor ends up giving it to her for free. So that's where she gets the pin in this. She doesn't get it as a gift from anything. Back at the house, Prim and Katniss are getting dressed up for the reaping. She tucks in Prim's tail again, that same little duck line. And then she also gives Prim the Mockingjay pin that she just got and says that it'll keep her safe. I do like the accuracy of, really everything, because the dialogue is fairly similar, the outfits are fairly similar. Like, there are changes that we'll see and that we'll be talking about, but like a lot of this book goes straight into the movie. It's honestly impressive. And then as they finish up getting ready, an alarm goes off that lets them know that it's time to head to the city center. And I really like the way that it shows everybody walking to the place where the reaping is taking place, because it's so gray and it's so dark and everybody looks so dull. And I really love the contrast with what the Capitol ends up looking like, because you can really see just how differently these people are living. You don't really have to even know anything about them or what they've been going through, but just the visuals alone is enough to tell the entire story. Prim starts freaking out as they walk up towards the reaping stage, because you have to get your finger pricked and give up a fingerprint of blood so that they can again do the population control and monitoring everybody. Katniss comforts her, tells her it's okay. They both make it through and they head off to their separate age groups. There are 3 officials on stage, which aren't really introduced, but I would assume that it's the mayor and whoever else. Again, the mayor's daughter has no significance here. It's not like she gives the pin or anything, so these are just people with the district. And then Effie pulls up. She's wearing a fully purple suit. I'm sorry, unrelated, little side note. It's my birthday as I'm recording this, and somebody just sent me a sweet little birthday message. I feel so loved. I do have to go. I'm gonna have to take a break recording this. I didn't think it was gonna take as long as it is, but I have a lot to say, clearly. But I'm feeling so loved this year. I'm gonna get through this section, at least. Effie puts on this video of Snow narrating the same things that we already know about District 13 and what the games are, why they exist, how they're meant to keep the district humble, basically. But they play it every year to the point where Gale is able to mouth it, which I have an issue with because that could be seen as mocking the Capitol, so why is he doing that and not getting punished? He's intentionally doing that towards Katniss to kind of be this thing that they get to laugh at. And it's you are being monitored every second of the reaping. I would not be that bold. And the thing is, we did already get an explanation of this in the Treaty of Treason when we had just the opening text that told us what it is, so I would much rather have this time explain to us why Gale has 42 entries, because I don't know if it's ever... there's one point where somebody makes a comment about oh, you had to put your name in this many times for the resources or whatever, but it doesn't go into that. So again, that number is really significant, but it doesn't feel like it goes anywhere, and it doesn't feel like it's something to remember because they don't really stick on it at all. And then the reaping goes on. Prim gets called up. I think the silence here is perfect. I think the tension, the way it builds up and then getting her name called, it genuinely is really good at making your heart drop when her name is revealed. Katniss, again, frozen in shock. She sees Prim tucking in the back of her shirt and goes, same thing, running up. I'd volunteer as tribute. We all know the scene. Again, very book accurate. Gale comes up, carries Prim away. Katniss gets up onto stage, reveals her name. Effie says the same thing that she says in the book about how, oh, you guys must be sisters and that's why you're up here. and then everybody, let's clap for your tribute. Nobody claps, everybody does the symbol. So again, this part is very, very accurate. Again, I would love to know why the symbol is significant, because obviously they're all doing it, it means something to them, but at least at this point, it's not explained what they're doing. So it's a powerful thing because they're doing it together, but not because I know the meaning behind it, you know? And then again, the same events play out where Peta is called up, they shake hands, she vaguely remembers this time where she's out in the rain and she sees him at the bakery, and then Effie leads the pair away. They go to these private rooms where the peacekeepers say not 1 hour, but 3 minutes are allotted to saying goodbyes. And the conversation is very much the same with Prim and her mom, where she tells Prim she's gonna be okay, like, sell what you have to do, use your goat, work with Gale, all the same stuff. She tells her mom not to check out, don't be like you did when dad died, all the stuff. And this is the only time that she really goes into her dad and how her mom reacted and how that's affected the family. In the book, she leans into it a lot more, especially in the early story, because obviously that's a huge part of how they are living, like why they're living this way, but in the movie you're not going to have as much time to just really dig into that point. But I like that they at least brought it up here to say specifically, hey, you can't check out like you did when he died, when I had to step up, all of these things. You still kind of get to understand why there's this tension between Katniss and her mom. Peta's dad does not make an appearance here. We see Gale run in and give her the same advice. You're strong, you know how to hunt, killing people is the same as killing animals, and make sure you get a bow because that's what you're good at. And Katniss says, well, maybe there won't even be a bow. And then what am I gonna do? But Gale emphasizes that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, they just want a good show. That's what it's all about. So I feel like in the movie, Gale is almost more anti-capital than in the book, which is really interesting. Normally, people kind of lose their depth when they get turned into a movie character, but in this it feels like Gale is even more dedicated to calling out the Capitol and criticizing them. And then they're on this luxury train, Effie walks them through it. It is such a full 180 from them being in their district and seeing how gray and sad everything is, and then immediately getting onto this train where there's like food being used as decoration is how abundant it is. Like there is so much around them, everything is beautiful, it's glass, it's intricate, like it's all this stuff. It's so different from what they just walked out of. And I think, I mean, it's such a good movie. The way that the audio makes you feel so disconnected, where it's like there are moments where there's only music and no audio from the actual things that are taking place. Like it's just really intense music as they're observing their new surroundings, as they're taking it all in. I just think the music in this movie is done so well. Effie is a lot nicer when she's talking to them. She's not as, like, insensitive about where they come from. But she does say that they're only here to experience all of this stuff for a little while, which is just, like, not a reminder you want to have. It's not necessarily mean, it is true, but it's just not very supportive. And then Effie leaves to go find Haymitch, who is probably in the bar car drinking. Peta and Katniss are sitting together, and Peta is trying to talk to Katniss. He's trying to, like, at this point, they haven't spoken at all. She remembers him from the bread thing, but they haven't spoken. So Peta is trying to talk about Haymitch, like, oh, have you seen him around? Like, do you have any opinions on him? Just making small talk about this guy that they're about to meet. And Katniss is, like, fully not talking to him, not looking at him, wants nothing to do with him. Which, sure, if you're about to go into this competition and you assume that you're gonna have to kill the other person, I can understand why you'd want the disconnect. But it does feel a little out of nowhere because up until this point, they don't know each other, so why is she being so cold to him already? But then Peta gets kind of unreasonably mad at Katniss for not responding and gets on her about, like, you know, you're gonna have to rely on Haymitch, like, you have to use him for help and stuff, as if she had said something negative about him or working together, which just didn't occur. So I'm not really sure what this interaction is. But when he says there's nothing wrong with accepting a little bit of help, she is again reminded of when he offered the bread, when he was offering some help. And then Haymitch comes out, he fills up his glass, he is his messy self, as usual. So Peta tries to remind him that, hey, you're a mentor, like, we kind of need you here, and what are we gonna do? Like, when are we gonna start? Haymitch sits down, he's very sarcastic, he's, like, very much a funny guy in the movie, which he's not especially like that in the book. I feel like he's a lot more upfront in the book, at least in the beginning. But in this, he seems to be making a huge joke out of everything. They say, where's our advice? What are you going to teach us? And he says, accept the inevitability of your death. There's nothing you can do about it. And then the pair of tributes gets mad. Katniss asks, why is he here? Like, what's he even there for, to help them or what? And Peta tries to take the drink out of his hand, which gets him a toe to the chest. Haymitch has got bare toes and sticks it onto Peta. Which I will say, this interaction does happen in the book. It just happens a little bit later. Like, their day one when they're on the train in the book is very much just for them to get settled in. And then the next day, they will have a very similar interaction with Haymitch. They just haven't seen him yet. And then Haymitch is mad. He gets up and leaves, but Peeta follows him, which is similar to how Peeta went to help him wash up after he threw up on himself. But I'm sure they just didn't want to have us all look at that in a movie, which is, I mean, thank you. And the thing is, I feel like in the book, Effie is more unlikable because she is somebody from the capital and she's kind of making a joke out of the district. She's not taking it seriously, even though she's supposed to be helping to represent them. Whereas Haymitch makes more sense because he came from the district and he's treated poorly. He had to survive the games and he's just living kind of a terrible life now. He's on his own, like he's coping with everything that he had to go through and he just has nobody around him. Whereas in this, Effie almost comes across as the nicer person because Haymitch comes out, he makes a joke out of their survival, he's got his bare toes on him, and then he leaves. So he comes across as a lot more unlikable in the beginning here. And Peeta does mention how he's like the only victor, how he's alone through all of this, but it doesn't really lean into how isolating that must be and how difficult of a time Haymitch must be having to be living this life at all. But I will say overall, the tone is very much the same with how these characters are all interacting, where there is this obvious tension with Haymitch where he's not taking it seriously, and then Effie is still making jokes about the whole situation. And obviously Peeta and Katniss are looking for guidance. They're looking for any type of advice to get through this. And then Katniss is left alone, where she is sitting and watching these two show hosts, Claudius and Caesar, the interview guy, and they are recapping past years. They're talking about other contestants and what has been going on, which we don't really see that much of in the book. She is a lot more relying on her memories to be like, oh, on this day we're going to be going to training, on this day we have an interview, just because she has the timeline memorized from having watched it all of these years. But in this, we actually get to see her watching commentary about the other games. And I think that is a really cool way to sort of substitute the memories that we wouldn't be getting from her head. And then she goes and looks in the other train car where Peeta and Haymitch are now talking strategy without her, rude. And the second Katniss walks in, Haymitch is so rude to her already. He's already like brushing aside what she's saying because Peeta and Haymitch are talking about like what you need to do when you get into the games. And Peeta says you have to find shelter, you have to have a fire for food, but Haymitch says that that's gonna be stupid. You can't light a fire because they're gonna find you. That's like an instant death wish. And then he'll turn and talk to Katniss, really condescending. And he still calls her sweetheart, which is something that he does throughout the book as well, and she hates it then too. But it feels so demeaning. It feels like he just doesn't care about her at all. He doesn't believe in her at all, which is interesting because in the book, when he falls off the stage, the first thing he says is, I like her, because he likes her bravery for standing up and for volunteering herself. So it's funny to see the total contrast between, like, maybe what he's really feeling towards her and then how he's choosing to act. And at one point, Katniss gets so fed up with being ignored that she takes a butter knife and stabs in between his fingers, which again is something that does happen in the book. And then Haymitch leads into this whole idea where you have to be likable. You have to have sponsors that actually like you so that they help you win. And then as they approach the Capitol, Peeta is looking out the window, he's smiling and waving, and Katniss doesn't get up from her seat. She just stays right where she is. She's a little grump, and Haymitch looks over at the two of them and says that Peeta is doing a lot better at all of this than she is because he's actually trying to be likable. He's trying to seem appealing to the Capitol, but she's just pouting in the background. And I do like that when we see the Capitol out the train window, it is still surrounded by mountains. It is still geographically accurate. And the crowd is very colorful, though I will always be hoping for more modification. I want them to look weirder, but that brings us to the Capitol. Welcome back. It is day 2 of recording this, and we're finally making it into the actual Capitol and getting towards the games. So where we left off in the book is a little bit before they arrive at the Capitol, and then where we are in the movie is they have just arrived. And the only reason I split it up like this is because in the book, that morning that they're getting ready to go to the Capitol is happening on the train, whereas in the movie, it's kind of like one big train day and then they're there. So it just, to me, made more sense to split it up like this, even though the events are kind of offset now because of it. But whatever. We're back in the book for now. This is the morning after the reaping, after they've been going on this train ride to get over to the Capitol, which takes less than 24 hours. And as they're getting closer to the Capitol, Katniss is starting to realize that she actually hates Haymitch, and she blames him for the District 12 of tributes usually not winning, because it doesn't seem like he's taking it seriously. It doesn't seem like he's really invested in giving them any strategies or any tips or anything like that. And he's just a messy guy and nobody wants to deal with him, which makes it very difficult for them to get sponsors. And this is the point where in the book they are talking to Haymitch. They're trying to convince him, like, hey, we need you to work with us. We need to know what's happening. Peeta gets mad and tries to call Haymitch out for not caring. And then Haymitch, instead of putting his bare foot on Peeta's chest, he punches him in the face, which is a lot cooler and a lot less weird to look at. I do not want to see his bare toes on the big screen, but that's what we got. And then this is also the same scene where Katniss, in response to all of this, takes the butter knife off the table and stabs it between Haymitch's fingers, which we kind of saw as two separate events in the movie, because initially Peeta was mad at the lack of training, and then separately Katniss was mad that he's not training her as well. But in this, it's like this combined frustration from the two tributes towards Haymitch. And the thing is, this is exactly what Haymitch wanted from them, because after this point, he's like, oh, okay, I have people from my district. I have these two tributes that are actually fighters, that actually want to win this. And from that point on, he locks in, and he actually starts guiding them, and he takes it seriously, because now he knows that they have a chance. Here are two tributes that aren't willing to just go in to die. They actually want to win, and they want to give it their all, and they feel like they have the right to do that. They feel like they deserve somebody who's going to help them, which I'm sure a lot of the other tributes probably initially feel that, but after seeing how they're treated so poorly, they might just give up and feel like it's not even worth it to ask for help at that point. And then we get to our description of the capital, which again, it's between all these big mountains, and it talks about how that's why when there was this uprising, when the districts were trying to fight back, they had a harder time, because the capital can see everybody that's coming, because you have to scale a mountain to get to them. And then it describes the people that are living within the capital, and it's talking about how they have really weird hair, and they have different colored skin and outfits and makeup, and it's really cool. And again, that's why I will always believe that in the movies they need to go harder with the body modification side of things. Sure, they have kind of weird hair and interesting makeup, but a lot of people are still, like, relatively human looking, and I feel like in the book they really lean into these people look otherworldly. And then as they're rolling up to the capital, Katniss and Peeta are both at the window because they wanted to look out and see what they're getting into, but Katniss walks away, and again, this is where we see Peeta trying to be friendly with the people in the capital while Katniss is shying away from it, and that makes her less friendly, which is against what Haymitch is advising. But this also kind of lets Katniss know that Peeta is taking the game seriously, and where she recognizes that he is, you know, playing up this nice guy role, but he actually does have a plan to try and win. He is seemingly getting the capital to be on his side. And at first, maybe it's just how he is. Maybe he's just a nice person. But when you're watching stuff like this and you're seeing the total contrast between, I mean, not just Katniss and Peeta, but also Peeta and, like, who he is in front of an audience versus on his own, you can kind of tell that he is playing it up for everybody else. There are a lot of parts of him that seem completely genuine, but to a certain extent it is all a performance, right? Officially, they're in the capital and they're sent off to their prep teams, which get them fully ready top to bottom for the stylists. So the prep team is mainly in charge of cleaning them up, making sure their hair is done, their bodies are waxed and clean, basically just making a big empty canvas for the stylist to come in and work on. And again, one of the stylists is described as having green skin. It's like, that's what I'm talking about. I want to see weirder. In the movie, they're cool, but it's like, that's kind of just what my average friend get-together looks like. Like, I want to see more. It's at the point where when Katniss is, like, fully stripped down naked in front of these people, and they're analyzing every inch of her body to try and figure out what they can modify and how they can clean her up to be the best version of herself, she is not self-conscious because she feels like they're unlike people. They're not even human to her. They're so different, not only in appearance but also personality. They seem so disconnected from the world that she knows. And then after these 3 hours where they fully get her ready, Cinna, her stylist, comes in, and he's such a cool guy. This guy comes in, he has no body modifications, he has no weird colors, he's no weird outfit, he's just wearing a plain shirt and pants, and the only really makeup or design that he has gold eyeliner on. But that's it. And from the beginning, it's a totally different vibe when he's talking to Katniss. He actually treats her like a person rather than something that's just a product for the capital. He starts out by giving her a compliment and then letting her put a robe on so that she isn't walking around naked, because he actually respects her as a human being. It's just a total 180 from how the stylists were treating her. Where obviously they're all here to do a job, but you can still do it in a way that's respectful, and nobody seems to care about that because they don't care about the people from the districts. But Cinna, throughout all of this, is just such a kind person to Katniss and to everybody. And she guesses that it's his first year being a stylist because you would typically get assigned to a worse district if you're newer. And he says, yes, it is my first year, but actually I requested District 12. I wanted to be here. He wasn't just thrown to the bad zone. He actually wanted to be a part of it, which is just a cool thing to see. Where, yes, he probably would have ended up there anyways, but he's not treating her like she's something that has to be dealt with, you know? Everybody looks at them as if they are doomed from the start. And then you have Cinna who's talking to them like they're real people. And it's just a really nice change. It's a really refreshing character to have in here. So we have Katniss, who is assigned Cinna, and then separately Peeta is working with his stylist Portia. But it seems like Cinna and Portia are pretty much on the same page about everything. They both, I mean, we don't know that much about Portia, but from what I could see in the book and the movie, she seems to be working pretty closely with Cinna. And it's not like Peeta came back talking about how terrible his experience was. So I would assume they're both relatively chill stylists. And Cinna talks about how typically when the District 12 tributes are getting dressed up, because they're getting ready for this big opening ceremony where they're all going to be kind of presented to the Capitol formally. And the whole thing is typically you would dress up in a way that represents what your district is known for. So, for example, District 12 is known for coal, so they would be dressed as coal miners. And she talks about how in previous years they've just, I mean, they look dirty and it looks lazy. And again, it's disrespectful to the people. It's just kind of making them look messy and embarrassing again. But rather than leaning into that, Cinna and Portia together have this idea where they're going to focus on not necessarily the coal miners, not the job itself, but the coal and the fire, highlighting the beauty and the strength that comes from what they actually work on, rather than just emphasizing the fact that they are workers. And the final outfit is described as a simple black unitard, knee-high leather boots, and a red, orange, yellow cape that's going to be lit on synthetic fire. And then along with that, there's a headpiece on top, which will also catch fire. And he says, as he's describing this idea and as they're setting it up, he wants her to be recognized as Katniss, the girl who was on fire, which is just not as impactful as the girl on fire. And it never changes. They say this same phrase throughout the entire book, Katniss, the girl who was on fire, and it just feels so lame compared to what they say in the movie, just because like past tense makes it seem like it's already we're beyond it, you know? I don't care that she was on fire because she's not now, versus saying the girl on fire is like that's her branding. So I will say that's one change that I'm happy they made for the movie, because I think it sounds a lot cooler to shorten it up a little bit. They arrive at the opening ceremony. Everybody is getting loaded up onto chariots, and all the tributes are going to be taken down throughout the city in this big like Thanksgiving style parade drawn by horses, and they're going to be wearing all of their stuff that represents their districts. And then at the end of this parade, they're going to present themselves to President Snow and like the big Capitol building before being taken off to training, where they're going to be for the next foreseeable future from now until the games, right? And Katniss and Peeta, this is the first time they're seeing each other together in their outfits, but they kind of joke about how they're scared that they're going to catch on fire and they're going to actually be on fire and they're going to burn themselves, and they're like having this moment where they're actually friends. It's like, it's a good thing to bond over, because it is a scary thing. It's a scary place that they're in right now. So the fact that they have each other at the very least, I would say is a good thing. Obviously, Katniss did have a little bit of distrust, especially when she's looking at Peeta and considering his strategy, where she doesn't know if he's being kind to her as part of a strategy or if he's genuinely just nice to her. But then she'll switch up and start laughing and making jokes with him and then kind of remember where she is. And I do like the back and forth of that, because that is how it would really go. If you're constantly torn between wanting a friend and wanting somebody that you can lean on, but also having to remember what you might need to do to them later, it's going to cause a lot of conflicting feelings and reactions when you're around them. But it's roughly a 20-minute ride through the city while they're being surrounded on all sides with the people from the city looking in at them. And then right before they take off, Cinna walks over, he lights the capes, he lights the headpieces, and they're off. And right before they leave him, right before he's out of eyesight, he motions for them to do something. And Katniss can't really figure out what it is, but Peeta is like, oh, I think he wants us to hold hands. So they hold hands for this entire 20-minute journey. They're presented as a pair, as a team throughout all of this. And they're going through the city, the sun is going down, and all eyes go to them. Because especially as the sun's going down, as it's getting darker outside, they are the one light that you want to look to. So everybody in the Capitol is looking right at them. And Katniss has this initial feeling of hopefulness where it's possible that maybe they'll get sponsors. This is obviously a memorable thing that they're doing, so it's possible that the Capitol is going to maybe think they have a chance just because they look cool in this moment. It's not like it shows anything about their skills or anything like that, but the fact that they're making this first impression gives her some hope. And then after this 20-minute ride, they pull up in front of President Snow's building, whatever, the Capitol, like, central. President Snow is there. He does this greeting speech. We don't even get to hear dialogue from him. Like, it's just described that he's doing this speech. And then the anthem plays, and then all the tributes are sent off to the training center. But when they get into the training center, all of the other tributes seem to be staring at this District 12 fire that just got put out. And it seems like they might be jealous. It seems like they might now consider District 12 a threat just because they took the attention away. And that's unheard of. Usually District 12 is something to laugh at, and here they are being pretty cool. And then Peeta, like, gives Katniss a compliment and says that flames suit her. And she's torn, again, on where this kindness is coming from, if it's part of a bigger strategy or if it's just him being a nice guy. And she combats that by giving him a kiss on the cheek. And it's like, this could be part of her strategy if she's trying to trip him up by being equally or more kind back, but also if he's interpreting this whole thing as genuine, then that's just really sneaky for her to do. But paired with the hand holding on the cart, it does sort of convince people even more that they are a team. They are in this together one way or another. And then that brings us to the actual training center, which is this giant tower for all the tributes and their teams. Every district has its own floor. So District 1 is the first floor, and then up on the top is District 12. And Effie and Haymitch are meant to be staying in this area with them. Effie is excited. She thinks they had a really good first impression, but Haymitch still hasn't really been seen since the train. And then Katniss goes to her private room to get ready for dinner, and she is taken aback by the technology and, like, the level of technology that's in her room, because it's so unlike everything that she has lived with up until this point. She has food on demand. She has a closet that you can program with whatever outfits. It's just a very fancy room with everything that you could ask for. And then after everybody has had a chance to kind of clean themselves up, they meet back up for dinner. It's Katniss, Peeta, their stylists, Haymitch, Effie, and then there are a couple of other people in the building, but they're not given names and they're not really acknowledged. At this point in the story, Haymitch is less drunk. He's taking them a little bit more seriously, and they're actually talking strategy, which is appreciated. While they're talking about this, Katniss looks up and recognizes one of the people that's around them in the building, because it's just one of the servers that's working there, and she's like, oh hey, I remember you, but everybody gets kind of weird about it. The server doesn't say anything and looks kind of scared, and then everybody else is like, no, you probably don't know her, you probably don't recognize her or anything. And they explain that she and the other people that are working around here are Avoxes, which are traitors of the Capitol, and as punishment for their crimes, they had their tongues cut out. So they now cannot speak, and they're forced to just serve. So Haymitch is saying, well, you probably wouldn't know her, she's a traitor. And Katniss almost pushes it. She almost continues that conversation, but Peeta speaks up and is like, oh wait, she just looks really similar to this other random girl in the district, so you're probably just mixing them up. And Katniss goes along with it for now so that nobody gets on her about whatever she's talking about, because it's clear that she's not supposed to engage with these people, but she spoke out of line or whatever. So she appreciates Peeta for bailing her out, but then when they're alone privately, he wants to know what's up. He wants to know why she would recognize this person. And Katniss goes into this story where she was out in the forest hunting, as she does, with Gale, when they saw this couple running around, and it seems like they're running from something, like something bad is going on. And then as they're watching, this couple is hunted down by like a hovercraft from the Capitol. The boy is killed instantly, and the girl is taken away. But before she makes eye contact with Katniss. She can see that they are watching, and Katniss kind of is haunted by this memory because she could have done something for this girl, and instead they just watched and let it happen. And now one thing led to another, and she's here serving Katniss in the Capitol with her tongue cut out. Which also is something I was mad about in the movie, and I kind of said I'd bring it up later, but in the movie, when she's talking to Gale, she says, oh, well, if we do this and this, they're gonna cut our tongues out. Except in the book, she seems surprised that this is even a punishment. She doesn't know about the Avoxes enough to know that she shouldn't be talking to or about them, right? So it's like an unnecessary line of dialogue that they added to the movie that gives her more awareness about the Capitol for no reason, unless she's just making a joke and doesn't know that that's a real thing that they do and it's supposed to be this little bit of foreshadowing or something. But I didn't like that because I think it's a lot cooler to be upset at the Capitol but to not even understand the full extent of their evil until you're in it, and then you just keep finding out all of these terrible things as you're living there. And then while Katniss is explaining that story to Peeta, he also asks her, like, oh, how are you related to Gale? Like, what's your situation? And she says, well, we're not, like, siblings related or anything like that, but we're not in a relationship either. We're just kind of hunting buddies. And he's satisfied with that, and they go to bed. Day 2 in the Capitol and their first day of proper training, Katniss wakes up, she dresses in black pants, a burgundy tunic, leather shoes, and her braid. And they get told that all of the tributes are going to have 3 days to train together before performing whatever skill they want to the game makers, who will then give them a score based on how likely it is that they're going to win or how much the sponsors should be leaning towards them. It's not everything, but it's good to get a high number because it means that you're gonna have more people on your side that could potentially give you things. I keep writing game changers in my notes, but it has to be game makers because Game Changers is a show, and I highly doubt that that's actually what I was reading. I think I just keep mixing it up on the words. So my bad if I say that at any point throughout this video. Haymitch is going to help them train, help them get ready, and he offers to train them separately, but they both say they don't have any secrets, they don't have any skills that they're trying to hide from the other person, so they can train together and it's fine. And then they also hype up each other's skills because even without realizing it, they've been observing each other for years. So Peeta knows that Katniss is really good with hunting, not because he's gone hunting with her or because he's necessarily a good hunter himself, but because they've received food from her and from her hunting, and he knows that she always hits her mark. He knows that she can always get a perfect shot because he sees the results. And then Katniss turns around and is like, okay, but you can't undermine your strength because you can throw around these giant sacks of flour, so you're really strong. And he keeps undermining that ability, and he says yeah, throwing stuff around is really gonna be what wins me the games. So they're both going back and forth, hyping each other up about skills that they maybe didn't even realize were that good. And then while they're talking about this, Peeta reveals that everybody thinks Katniss is gonna win. Everybody thinks if somebody from District 12 is going to be a winner, it's not going to be him, including his own family, because before he was sent away, his mom said, we might finally have a victor from District 12, and she wasn't talking about him. His own mom was saying that maybe Katniss will win. He already is being assumed dead by the people in his life. It's just a really depressing thing to see. Peeta is trying to talk to Katniss, and he's saying how she doesn't even know the impact that she has on other people, and she sort of takes that as an insult. She sort of takes that as he thinks that people pity her and that they feel like they need to give things to her. But in reality, it's more like she's so captivating and she's so good at making people root for her, but she just doesn't see it at all. She's seeing this only as an evil thing that he's saying. But back to training, Haymitch is advising them to focus on skills that they're not that great at, to not show off their bow skills or their hunting or their throwing bags of flour or whatever it is until you're actually in the room with the game makers. Because you don't want to give the other tributes any idea of what you're capable of. You want to keep it a secret so that you can catch them off guard. And he also advises them to lean into the friendship strategy or romance or whatever it is at this point. They were holding hands on their way in, and he would like them to continue that act throughout the training, to not split up, to always be training the same things together, so they're always seen together, they're seen like more of a pair. Especially because they both said they don't mind training together, so now they're really leaning into this strategy. And then they are taken downstairs because the training area is below all the district levels, so below District 1. They have 3 days. You can kind of bounce from station to station and just see what works for you. Everybody can test out whatever station they need to do, but there's no actual combat allowed. You can't fight the other tributes because you're not in the games yet, obviously. And Katniss is sort of observing the competition at this point, and she realizes that she's a lot more fit. She's a lot physically stronger than people from the other districts just because she's had all this time to learn how to hunt in her own district, in her own home. So she does have an advantage over people from not the very top districts, but the people in the middle that are maybe not the most adequately fed and they don't have as much experience just moving their bodies. But then there's also the career pack to worry about, and the careers are people from districts 1 and 2 and those higher up districts where they are typically, they live to play these games. They grow up in wealthier districts, so they're fed adequately from a younger age, whereas the people in the farther districts probably don't have enough money to be doing that. And they're also trained to be in battle, which technically you're not even supposed to really be training for the games. Like, it's supposed to be even competition, but the people from these higher up districts are able to practice and get really good at killing machines, and then they show up here and nobody else stands a chance, and that's why they typically are the winners. And they don't even need to hide their skills. They are focusing on being intimidating and on making the other tributes feel scared, so they show up and they show out. They are doing their most scary tactics and really just showing how deadly they can be. So then over these training days, Peeta and Katniss are stuck together the entire time, and they practice tying knots, they practice doing some camouflage, because Peeta talks about how he was a cake decorator, so he does kind of have an idea of how to manipulate designs, I guess. I don't know what kind of materials they had in District 12 to where he has this level of camouflage experience, but whatever. At one point they're training spears, and Rue, the little girl from District 11, seems to be watching them from behind, and Peeta says, "Oh, we have a little shadow." And they sort of debate, like, oh, what should we do about her? But they decide to just leave her alone and let her watch. They don't really engage with her in any way, but they're also not intimidated by the fact that she's watching or anything like that. And Katniss is reminded of her sister when she sees Rue. Both have flower names, both are around the same age and the same size. And throughout all of the training days, Peeta is like going back and forth trying to make jokes with Katniss, but she doesn't know how to react because she doesn't know where they stand as real friends versus as competition. So she's trying to shut down any chance of friendship, and she tells him, like, we're in the games, but that's it. So we can be friendly on the field while we're training, but when we're private, when we're having dinner together or whatever it is, we don't need to be friends. Like, this is all part of a strategy and nothing else. And then after the 3 days of training are up, they've bounced around from station to station. They're all going in to present their skills to the game makers and to get their assessments, I guess. So it starts at District 1, it goes down the line, and then Katniss goes before Peeta, and she's doing her bow skills. She picks them up, and they're not the same material as what she's used to in the district. These are a lot smoother, a lot more metallic, rather than like natural wood that she'd probably have for her own bow. She comes in, and she's trying to shoot some stuff, and she is immediately aware of the fact that the game makers up above are not really interested in what she's doing. They've sat through 12 other districts or 11 other districts to get to this point. They've seen 20 different acts. So they're not interested in what she's doing right now. They're all interested in their food or their drinks or whatever it is. So after a couple of good shots, which she thought would be impressive, but they're just not paying attention, she looks up at where the game makers are sitting, and there is a giant roasted pig that just came in with an apple in its mouth. So she decides to point it up at them and shoot the apple right out of the pig's mouth, which obviously is going to get all the game makers' attention. And also keep in mind, there is a whole group of game makers. There's no individual like there is in the movie with Seneca. In this, it seems like there's a group of people, and they all seem to have the same level of power where they're all just kind of assessing things, and they all work together, but they're not really named, and they're not really, I don't know, they're not really like in charge in the same way that Seneca is, where it seems like he's very much working with Snow to personally do things to the games. She shoots at the pig, gets everybody's attention, and then she bows, she says, "Thank you for your consideration," and she walks out. And then she goes to her bedroom and she cries for hours because she thinks she just ruined her chances by making all the game makers hate her. So now they're going to give her a really low score, or they're not even going to let her live to make it to the games. They just hate her so much because of what she did. She just disrespected the Capitol, and now they're going to get her. And then over dinner, Peeta is talking about how he also felt ignored the same way that she did, but she reveals what she did, and her team gives her an interesting response. She just spent a long time crying alone in her room, feeling totally hopeless over what she did, but her entire team points out that there's nothing the Capitol can do that would be worse than what they're already doing to her. Like, even if they hate her right now and they think she did this crime against the city and all these terrible things, she's already going to the death games. Like, there's nothing they can really do to her at this point that would be so bad, because they're already making her do this. So at the end of the day, the worst that they could do is make her game a little bit harder, make her struggle a little bit more, but she's already going to be struggling during the games. So she ends up kind of laughing it off with her entire team because they all convince her that's really not that big of a deal. And honestly, it's kind of cool that she stood up and did that. And then they all sit together to watch the results of the assessments, and most of the people in the career pack are getting 8 to 10. Like, that's a really solid score because it's 1 to 12. So they're on the higher end of things. They get to Peeta, and he also got an 8, which is really cool. And then they announced Katniss, who got an 11. She was so scared that they would hate her, but in reality, it seems like they really liked her bravery. They really liked her attitude, honestly. She just always has this spark. She's always willing to push the boundaries just a little bit. And it seems like it's paying off because she got the highest score out of anybody. At the end of the day, the game makers want a show, and this proved that she can put one on for them. That brings us to a friendly little Sunday in the capital, and she's briefly, reflecting on her relationship with Gale. She misses how simple things were. She is thinking about her relationship with Peeta and how complicated this is because she doesn't know what's real or not. But then she gets to breakfast, she's piling up her plate, she goes to sit down, and there's just this heavy, awkward tension when she sits. And she's trying to eat, she's trying to have a normal morning, but she has to ask, what's up? Why is the vibe so terrible this morning? And it is revealed that they're all supposed to be getting ready for interviews that they're going to have the next night, but at this point in the games, Peeta has decided that he is no longer going to be training with her. Really can only be interpreted as him having secrets and not wanting her to know, which means he's taking this competition more seriously. He's seeing her as somebody to protect himself from, which is kind of tearing a hole in the entire romance situation that they have going on, or at least the alliance side of things. And despite the lack of trust that she feels towards Peeta for everything, really, she still feels betrayed by this because they both agreed they didn't have secrets, they're fine working together, and now she's kind of getting this out of nowhere, where it's just one night they appear to be totally fine, and then the next he wants nothing to do with her, and it's not really explained at this point. And she immediately interprets that as him getting worried because she outperformed him and everybody at training. So the new plan, instead of the two of them working together, is they will both equally have time with Haymitch and Effie. So 4 hours spent with Haymitch, 4 hours spent with Effie. And this time is just being used on how to have the best strategy when you're going into the interview, how to present yourself the best way, all of this type of stuff. But the entire time Katniss is talking with both members of her team, they're just saying you have to be more friendly, you have to be more likable, you're so unpleasant and kind of rude right now, and we have to clean that up. But she just doesn't want to. It's just so fake and so forced, and she can't get to that point. She can't ever make herself appealing to this audience when she's so against all of it. And she doesn't want to give any of herself away to them. She doesn't want to talk about her personal life when none of these people actually care. So before she goes to bed, she has a little tantrum because it seems like her team wants this and it's impossible. There's no way that she can make herself palatable for the Capitol. It's just, she's angry. And she throws a bunch of stuff around. She's throwing all these dishes. The Avox girl that she recognized comes into the room, obviously doesn't say anything, but she starts cleaning up the mess, and she tucks Katniss into bed and takes care of her. And it's just really sweet, and it's one of those things where Katniss, like how she felt like she owed Peeta for the bread earlier, she now feels even more like she owes this Avox girl because she didn't save her before, and now here she is being taken care of by that same girl, so it just feels even more like Katniss is taking and taking and taking, and she's not giving anybody anything back. But that brings us to interview day, the day before the games, where she wakes up to Cinna and the style team getting ready and picking out her outfit and making sure she is shiny. She's got this shimmer all over her body, and her dress is reflective, and she describes herself. She says, "I am not pretty, I am not beautiful, I am as radiant as the sun." And then she sort of talks to Cinna as well about strategy, about how she should present herself during this interview, and he takes a different approach from her team. He says, well, I like you, and you've acted just how you are with me, so why don't you just try to be yourself on stage? Sure, Haymitch doesn't seem to like her, but for the most part, everybody else does. Even the entire style team, everybody else that's been working around her, Effie even, I guess. But he says he'll sit in the front row, and she can just talk to him as if she's talking to a friend, as if she's just telling a new person about herself. And that's kind of what Peeta was talking about earlier, where he's like, you don't even know how you affect other people. Like, this is what he's talking about. She's just so captivating. She's just so good at getting people to like her. and she just doesn't see it. And it seems like her team doesn't really see it either, but clearly some people do because Cinna is all for it. That brings us to the actual interview where we see Caesar Flickerman, the interviewer, the host. He's got pure white makeup on, he has blue hair and a blue twinkling suit. And every tribute is only given 3 minutes, but Caesar is really good at making them look good. He's really good at buffering all the awkward pauses. He's really good at leading them through things. He's really good at asking the right questions to keep the interview moving in a way that makes the tribute still look good. It's not meant to be a time for them to be laughed at. He wants to make them look good. And I think that's a cool thing where it's not just a show about making some tributes look really good and some become the laughingstock of the games. It's just find something good about each one, and he's really good at that. So Katniss comes out, she does her interview with Caesar, and she's still sarcastic, she's charismatic, she talks a little bit about how she shot at the Game Makers, but they're not allowed to talk about what goes on in the room, so it's kind of just a subtle look over at the Game Makers who are in on this joke. And then she gets up and she twirls in this shiny yellow dress, and it says that she is engulfed in flames, but it's not necessarily real flames. It's more just like the dress is so shimmery that it gives the illusion of flames. She finishes her interview, goes off stage, and then Peeta comes on. He is immediately a lot more of a funny guy. He's just really friendly with Caesar and with the audience. He seems very comfortable. Caesar says, "You're an attractive guy. Like, do you have any girl at home that's waiting for you?" And he says, "No, there's this one girl that I have a thing for, but it's not going to work out because she came here with me." And that obviously gets the crowd really interested because that means that there's this secret romance between him and Katniss that she didn't know about until this moment. This is how it gets revealed. But the thing is, she feels really betrayed by this when she's finding it out because he said he doesn't want to work with her. So why is she all of a sudden being tied into his strategy? But the crowd is really into Peeta now because they all have this understanding of unrequited love. They all can empathize with what he's going through. And it sort of reframed the entire approach of District 12, where now you have the two of them tied up in this romance, which she didn't get to decide if she wanted to be in that, but now that's how they're going to be entering the games. That's how they're going to be seen, regardless of how she wants to attack it. And technically that brings us to part 2 in this book, which is called The Games. But I'm going to go just a little bit past it because there is still the aftermath of this interview. So after the interviews are done, after Peeta drops that bomb on them, they are back up on top of the tribute building on level 12, and Katniss shoves Peeta, says he has no right to say those things, he has no right to be including her in that, but when Katniss shoves him, he falls down onto the ground and lands on broken glass, so now his hands are all cut up, which is really inconvenient the night before the Hunger Games. And it's also technically not allowed because she's fighting another tribute, but there are no consequences because she is rightfully angry and nobody in their team is going to report her or anything. Peeta explains that it was his idea to present them that way and that Haymitch helped come up with the strategy. Katniss argues that this entire thing is going to make her look weak, but they argue back and say that it makes her look desirable, and that with her bad attitude, she wouldn't have been able to do that on her own, so really they're doing her a favor. And Haymitch is saying this, so of course, she's a little bit offended, because he can be kind of rude. But Cinna actually backs it up and says, well, it's good that you have this branding, it's good that this is how people are going to see you, it's good for the show. And eventually Katniss comes around, she realizes that this does make them unforgettable, and they make up. And then the pair is getting ready to go off for the games. They're watching back all the interviews and, again, assessing everybody's skills. And this is the night before, but this is where they have to say goodbye to some of their team because the style crew is going to stay around to help Katniss get ready in the morning, but Effie and Haymitch have to go up to the Capitol to start securing sponsors, to start talking about these tributes. So they have to say their goodbyes here. Effie says goodbye by saying that they are the best tributes that she's ever had, and then Haymitch gives them some survival advice. He says a couple of things. For one thing, avoid the cornucopia. If you go in there, it's a bloodbath and you're probably not going to make it out. Second, find water or else you will die because you need that to survive. And the third thing, stay alive. Katniss goes and showers and tries to sleep, but she is just not able to fall asleep, which again, understandable, big day tomorrow. She goes up to the roof to get some fresh air, and Peeta's also up there. I want to say they had come up here to have that conversation about how they recognized the Avox girl earlier. I just didn't make a note of it, but this is a place that they are allowed to go. They sit up on this roof and they're looking down at the city, which is throwing a bunch of parties, and it's just such a total disconnect from what they're experiencing. She apologizes to Peeta for hurting his hands, but he says that he was never a contender here. He never stood a chance, and all that he wants out of these games is to be himself. He doesn't want the capital to turn him into something he's not. He doesn't want them to change him into a monster. And that makes Katniss feel kind of shallow, because up until this point, she's really only been worried about how to win and what the strategy is and all this stuff, but he is out here contemplating who he is as a person. Instead of trying to be nice to him or trying to relate, she turns around and is angry back at him, and she leans into this idea that they are just pieces in the game, that they really don't stand a chance. It's the same argument that she had with Gale earlier, where these guys are envisioning a future or some way that they can fight the capital, but she feels like it's so hopeless and so impossible, and she doesn't even want to try. But the thing is, you can see the seeds of rebellion being planted in the story. You can see all the people around her questioning if what's going on is right and what can they do about it. So they have their little argument, split off, go to bed, and in the morning, it's time to get ready for the games. And then really fast, let's switch over to the movie where they have just arrived at the Capitol. And I want to say it's an interview with Caesar, but we see Seneca talking about how it's weird to have a volunteer from an outlier district, so it's going to be an interesting game, which is what we talked about before, about how normally you don't volunteer if you're from a district that's probably going to die. If you're from one of the higher up main districts, then you might volunteer just because you're so strong and brave and you want to prove that you can do it. But typically, if you're in a district that's not going to survive, you're not going to throw yourself into that. You're just going to mourn your loss and move on. And then in the Capitol, Katniss gets with her prep team where they're doing the full body cleanup, and she's not like standing there. She's obviously wearing clothes because it's not that type of movie, but she is like on a medical table. She's like flat on her back, and it just feels a lot more malicious rather than, I feel like in the book it almost felt like birds that are trying to like clean up another one. You know what I mean? It's very much a procedure. Like, she's flat on her back in a medical robe, and it just feels a lot more serious. And they're also not like, I don't know, in the book they're a lot more interested in her, not necessarily as a person, but more just like, man, it's so weird you look like this, and all of these comments about her body. Whereas in this, they seem to be a lot more withdrawn and a lot more focused on the task at hand. And then she goes to a separate, isolated room with just Cinna still on her back in a robe. But he is that same awesome character that we got in the book. He comes in and he apologizes for what happened to her, first of all. And he comes in saying that she's brave for what she did. So right away, we still get that same feeling when we see this character. And he fits the appearance. He still has regular person clothes, just that gold eyeliner. And then they talk a little bit about the typical coal miner outfits, but how he wants them to make an impression. So he has this idea. He explains that they want her to make an impression when they go down, do the parade and everything. He wants her to be memorable. He wants to make sure they get sponsors. He just establishes really early on that he believes in her, which is such a nice difference from how everybody else has been this entire time. And then we cut to after the outfits are on, Cinna and Portia are together with Katniss and Peeta, and they're talking about the outfits that they have on. They're all black, and they say, the suits aren't real fire, you're just gonna look that way. We don't get the conversation between Peeta and Katniss. They don't really interact at all here, so we're missing that, like, human moment of, man, this sure is scary, that comes from them in the book. There's still this weird disconnect where for some reason Katniss is determined to ignore Peeta, even though up until this point they haven't really spoken at all. Like, even on the train, she was ignoring him, and obviously there seems to be a preference with Haymitch training Peeta but not getting into it with Katniss, but at the same time, it's not like Peeta has been overly nice to Katniss in a way to where I would suspect him doing it as a strategy, so I don't know. I just feel like we haven't seen enough of the two of them together, and I wish we were seeing more. Because despite everything, there is still going to be this feeling of camaraderie between the two, which is why I like how she's so back and forth in the book on how she feels towards him. But instead of it being outside, and instead of it being this giant parade through the city, it's just a bunch of chariots that are going to walk down this really long auditorium. And it's filled to the top with people, yes, but it's not anywhere near as grand as a whole 20-minute parade going down the entire Capitol. It's this whole long auditorium, and then President Snow is up at the end, and you have Caesar Flickerman and then Claudius, who's another announcer, almost like Thanksgiving parade style, which I said earlier, but now they're commentating on the entire thing from a stage above it, so it's very much giving Thanksgiving Day parade, just without the parade. We see Seneca up in the Game Maker room, and he says that they're all good to go, and the chariots are off. The two announcers are talking about all the different districts and what the different outfits represent, but when Katniss and Peeta ride out of the big doorway, they're the last ones out because they're District 12, the commentary just kind of trails off because they're so caught off guard. They're like, what is that over there? And then they're just so in awe over how beautiful it is because their outfits are fully on fire. I don't think it shows them being ignited. It doesn't show like the initial fire, but it does show them blazing as they're going through. And then instead of Cinna suggesting it, Peeta holds out his hand and tells Katniss the crowd is going to love it. And she takes his hand and they hold them up together. But they ride to the end of this building, and then President Snow is up on his podium. He gives their little greeting speech. And when we see Katniss and Peeta, the fire has gone out, but at one point, Katniss, I guess, caught a rose that was being thrown down by the audience. But President Snow says his little welcome speech, and then they all ride off to go their separate ways and to get ready for the training and their personal apartments and everything like that. Cinna meets up with them. He says that they're amazing, and Katniss jokes that Haymitch can't be around an open flame because there's so much alcohol in his body, which is a joke that's made in the book, but it feels a little out of place here because I mean, it was a good vibe. Like, why are you going at him like that? He didn't do anything. And while they're all standing around celebrating this victory, they see Cato from District 2. He's one of the tributes, and he's staring daggers at them, and they get a little intimidated. They say, hey, let's go up to our floor. Let's get out of here. And that is kind of the visual for the tributes looking at them and being jealous that they had taken the attention away from the book. So then they get up to their District 12 floor, and it's a full penthouse. It's a fancy apartment. There are, I want to say, like 3 Avoxes that are working in the building, which you don't even initially see. They blend in with the furniture when it's panning over the room, and they're not acknowledged in any way at this point. Katniss goes to her personal bedroom. She's playing with this hologram wall. She sets it to a forest, and she's kind of dreaming of her life back home. And then that brings us to the next day in the training room, which in this they have the next 4 days to take away whatever they can, and they're all wearing matching black outfits with these red sleeves. Cato is still fully staring at them, which is interesting because in the book, it's very much like all the other tributes are jealous and are kind of giving them mean looks, but in this, it very much focuses on Cato. He is the big bad guy that we're supposed to be worried about. But it goes over the same basic rules of the book, where you can't fight other tributes, but you are allowed to bounce from station to station, whatever you need. And also, they emphasize that you should be focusing on not just fighting, but also how to survive in nature, because a lot of people are going to be taken out just by the elements. And I think that's a cool thing to mention here, because it's not really brought up in the book that much, but yeah, a lot of people are going to die just from a lack of water, or from not being warm or cold or whatever it is, or trying to find food in the woods and trying to, just get by while there's not tributes around, because there's not always going to be a fight happening. And then everybody goes off to train their specialties. Like, all the careers from the earlier districts are focusing on showing off. And then you see people like Foxface, which is one of the tributes that we'll get to know a little bit better. And she has red hair. That's like her identifying feature. But her big skill is that she's really good at thinking on her feet. She's really quick. And you see her doing this thing, which some people think is a plant identification game. Other people say that it's maybe a memory type of game, like a matching type of game. And that will come back up later, because if it's a memory game, it's showing how quick she is at thinking, or like a matching game, or whatever you want to call it. But if it's a game where you are identifying berries, then that would suggest something later. But we'll get into that way later. At one point, while they're all training, Cato is yelling at another tribute for stealing his knife, and he ends up putting his hands on him, which should not be allowed because they're in a place where everybody can see it, and you're not allowed to fight the other tributes. That's a rule that they just established, so I don't know why there's no consequence for doing this. Maybe just because it wasn't fighting, it was just kind of a light shove, but probably more just because it's a career and nobody's gonna go at him. We pan up and see that actually Rue is in like this rope ladder above all of them, and she has the knife, but nobody's looking up. Nobody knows that she has it, and Katniss sees her up there, and they kind of have this moment where they laugh together. And then after the training day, they're back having dinner with Effie and Haymitch, and they talk a little bit more about the careers and how they grew up learning to be skilled for the games. This is something they've trained for their entire lives, but Effie points out that they're not given special treatment, which, sure. Haymitch says that they're trained until they're 18 and they volunteer for the games, which I don't really know how the volunteering would work then, because is there one person from each age group that's designated to volunteer regardless of who's picked, or is it something like everybody wants to volunteer? Because then how would you choose between all the volunteers? So I have questions about like the logistics of the higher up district volunteering system. Basically, they're really good and they come in prepared, so they win almost every year, but sometimes, because of that, they can get arrogant, and that can be their downfall. And then this is where they have that conversation of who has what skills, so Haymitch asks, do either of them have anything they're good at? Peeta hypes up Katniss's bow skills, and she hypes up his strength. They have the same exact conversation about how his mom is rooting for Katniss, but not him. And she does remember now when that whole bread throwing thing went down because Peeta was getting yelled at in that moment. So it seems like the mom just maybe doesn't like him very much. And then we just see a couple days of training, which Peeta and Katniss are not told to be together. They don't work together. They just kind of float around the different areas separately and then sometimes come together to see different skills. But for the most part, they're doing their own thing. At one point, Peeta is practicing his camouflage, and Katniss shows up, and his entire arm is camouflaged like tree bark, like perfectly. What kind of cakes is this man baking? And at one point, Peeta is like trying to climb something. He's trying to just test his skills, honestly. It's not like he's trying to show off. It's not like he's necessarily trying to learn how to do this right now. He's just sort of doing a skill, which is allowed, and he falls off, which causes all of the careers to laugh. And Katniss comes up and says, hey, Peeta, go over there, throw that really heavy ball, because the careers are all laughing at you. They think you're easy, like they're just gonna take you out no problem. And Peeta, I mean, as he should, says, no, but Haymitch said we should hide our skills. We shouldn't be showing them off like that, because then we're gonna reveal the only thing that we might be able to use to fight back in something like this. But she says, no, you have to do it. They're laughing at you. So Peeta goes up, he picks up this big heavy ball, and he throws it. And that, I don't know, impresses or intimidates the career pack. I do think it's a silly move, and it just makes Katniss look like a worse person now for actively going against what Haymitch advised just because she doesn't really want them to look bad, because the whole point is that they're trying to hide these skills so that they have something to go in with that people don't already know about and know to anticipate. So advising him to do the one thing he's good at, and now he has no surprise skill to bring out, I don't know. I'm not sure why she thinks she has the authority to tell him to do that, and I'm not sure why he would listen. And again, around this time, they do see Rue being a little shadow following around behind, but they don't really talk about it or do anything. They just see her, and then they carry on training. And then something that we really don't get in the book at all, but we see a little bit in the movie, is we see Haymitch sitting in the Capitol and just looking around at the citizens and how they're experiencing all of this, where you have a big screen up with everybody's odds of how likely they are to succeed in the games and a bunch of stats about like their height and whatever else, what district they are and all of that. And then you also see children, honestly, going around and playing violence. They have weapons out and they're going at each other, and it's all good fun for them because they don't have to live it, but obviously it's very real for the people from the district. So Haymitch is looking at all of this and he's just not happy. He's really just angry at the state of things. And then over dinner, he is fully back in work mode. He is trying to advise them as best as he can. He's talking about how they have to show their strength during the game maker thing. They have to be memorable so that they can get more sponsors. And then it's evaluation time. Peeta tells her to shoot straight, but in the book, she responds and gives him some vague, hopeful comment back, but in the movie, she just keeps on walking. She goes in, and I would say this scene of her walking in, taking the bow, trying it, not getting any attention, and then shooting at the pig is like as perfect of a visual as it could be for this scene. I think the game makers are exactly where they're supposed to be in the room relative to her. I think the shooting is perfect. I think, the only real difference is obviously the fact that Seneca is a bit more of a focus. Like they have a central game maker and then just a bunch of other people in the building. But for the most part, this is perfect. And then we cut back to the apartment where Effie is going off on Katniss and saying how it looks really bad and how she shouldn't do that, she should be respectful, and it's just like childish. She acted in anger. But on the other hand, Cinna is sitting there and saying that it looks really good. It's a good show again. And then Haymitch walks out and just gives her a really proud thumbs up, and that's the moment where he switches over into a character that we love, because he's just so happy that she made a fool out of the Capitol for a moment, and it's just I really love that reaction so much. Katniss is a little stressed over what she did, but again, they have this conversation about how things can't possibly get worse for her than how they already are. And then the scores are announced. Again, Peeta gets an 8, Katniss gets an 11, and they all celebrate. Haymitch says they must have liked her guts, and that's why they rated her so high, and then Cinna says, to Katniss, the girl on fire, which is the first mention of that name. This is a celebration of not only Katniss being cool and, everything that she did just now, but it's also a celebration at this thing that is anti-capital. Like, shooting towards them was obviously unconventional, but they're also celebrating that act in itself. And then we see how President Snow is reacting to this rating, because he's talking to Seneca Crane, and he asks why she got an 11. Seneca is trying to say that he likes her spark, he likes her energy, and she shot really well at the apple and got their attention, but Snow argues back and says, no, she shot at you guys, like, this is a problem. He asks Seneca why they have the games in the first place and says it's because people need hope, and that it's okay to have a little spark as long as it's contained, but you don't want it to get out of control, as if to say it's fine for Katniss to put on a little bit of a show, but you don't want her to do these little things that are all minor acts of rebellion, because it's going to inspire people to do more. You don't want to have a bunch of people that are seeing somebody fight back against the Capitol, because they're going to be encouraged to do the same thing. And of course, this entire scene doesn't happen in the book. We really don't see anything from President Snow in the book, except for, like, their final conversation, and we also don't get anything from Seneca, who is not even really a character that's seen in the book. But I think it's interesting that from so early on, we're seeing Snow as somebody who is anti-Katniss, where she hasn't even made a joke out of the games yet, but even just this small act against the game makers is enough to have him looking out, and I'm wondering how much of that is because of his own memories, his own life where he was in the districts and he saw similar things happening. And then the night before the final training day, Katniss is having dinner with everybody, but Peeta is not there, and that's because he wants to work alone. He wants to split off now, which Haymitch says is common right before the games, because you kind of realize where the stakes are and you want to make sure that you're as good as you can be. You don't want to give your district mate any sort of advantage against you when it comes to that. The thing is, because it was never really communicated that they're working together, like, even during training, they were never told that they have to stay together. They never were told that they have to stay doing the same things at the same time. They were never even told to hold hands during the opening ceremony. That was something that Peeta decided to do, which now makes this decision even more hurtful, because he's the one that suggested the team up in the beginning, and now he's the one shutting it down. But it's a lot less impactful because it's not the team telling them to do that, it's just him on his own. So it's a lot less about strategy. It's a lot more personal coming from Peeta for all of this, really. But it never really established whether or not they are deciding to work together. It was just kind of assumed. And then we go to Caesar, who's getting ready for the interviews, and we have Katniss in this orange dress, which Cinna hypes her up. I'm a bit confused about the timeline. I don't know if this is the next day or the same day. Not that it really matters, but I was trying to keep track of it day by day, and I got a little lost in the training in the Capitol and all of that, because there's supposed to be 4 training days, but then I don't know if we saw all of them, or if some days were dedicated to preparing for these interviews, or I don't really know what's up with the day-to-day life of these people, but regardless, we're on the final interview day before the games. We didn't see any individual training time with Katniss or with Peeta. We just know that they're going to be doing things separately, and all of a sudden they're at these interviews, and Cinna is giving the same advice of just be yourself, everybody likes you, that type of thing. Feels a little less impactful because we don't know who was telling her otherwise, because we never saw the individual training days where they're prepping for this interview. And then they're waiting to all go up, and we see glimpses of the other interviews from the other tributes where you can see that, like, Cato has his strength, and you have Foxface, who is quick on her feet. She's really smart. Rue can climb. You're just getting a glimpse into all the different tributes and their skills. And then Katniss comes out and is introduced by Caesar as the girl on fire, which I think is really interesting, that it's not just a name that's going around between her and her prep team. It's something that is immediately adopted by the Capitol. And it's like, sure, you can give them all names because you think it's fun for the competition, but at the end of the day, this name is very powerful for her. It ends up doing numbers. So I think it's really interesting that even this early on, they've already taken that as part of her identity here. She's a bit overwhelmed by the audience initially, but still, Caesar's really good at walking everybody through the interviews, so they get past it no problem. They get into a conversation about her dress and how she was on fire, and she's like, oh, I brought the fire with me today. Do you want to see it? And she gets up and she spins around, and the bottom of her dress catches fire, which is cool, but I don't know that that's what happened in the book. In the book, she does get up and spin around in her dress, and you can kind of see the illusion in the shimmer of it all, I guess. But she feels silly after she's done it, and she feels like she's kind of seen as childish for just spinning around. And to me, that reads as this is a completely normal dress, and she just felt like spinning, and now she's embarrassed by it. Whereas in this, Cinna crafted a dress that can catch on fire again so that she can do it on stage. So when she's spinning around, it's not necessarily for her, it's to show off this artwork. that he put on her. And so she would have less reason to feel embarrassed over her performance because this is exactly what she was supposed to do. This is something that was planned by the person who styled her, right? So whatever, she's on fire again, and then they sit down, they have a more serious moment where they're talking about Prim, and then her interview is over, she steps off. Peeta's interview comes up last. Again, he's very charismatic, he's full of jokes. He and Caesar sniff each other at one point. They get to the point in the interview where Caesar's asking, do you have a girl back home? And I would say, again, Peeta's dialogue here is very, very similar to the book, where he's saying that it's not going to work out, she came with, the crowd awes, and Katniss is mad. After the interview, she doesn't shove him to the floor, she doesn't hurt his hand, she just holds him up against a wall until the team shows up and pulls her away. And again, you have Haymitch arguing that really Peeta did her a favor, that now she is looking desirable, which I don't know if it has the same impact because we didn't see those 8 hours of the team trying to convince her that she needs to be likable. We didn't see the individual training where they're saying that she's so unlikable and that she needs to change who she is. So for them to now say that he's doing her a favor doesn't really make sense because we don't know why they think that. The last thing we saw is her getting an 11, and that's really as far as we know for what the team thinks of her. So now saying this, where it's like, oh, Peeta did you a favor, it's like, well, I thought she was fine. I haven't seen your 8 hours of trying to convince her how she needs to perform during the interview. So as far as I know, she did okay. I don't know that she necessarily accepts it or agrees with it, but they move on. And then it's the night before the games. They don't have roof access in the movie, so when she can't sleep, she goes walking out just, I guess, into the living room of their apartment. Peeta is sitting by a window and watching the city. She joins him, apologizes for going to attack him, and then again, they have a very similar conversation about how he doesn't want to be turned into a monster, he doesn't want to turn into something he's not, and he questions how you can show that the Capitol doesn't own you. And the thing is, I did forget to mention before, when they are initially having this conversation in the book about the Avox girl that Katniss remembers, sorry to jump all the way back there, but when they're having this conversation, when Peeta is like, hey, how did you know that girl? Like, I covered for you, so now you have to tell me the truth. They don't want anybody to hear the conversation because they assume they're being recorded at all times so that they can be broadcast, like anything that they're doing at any moment. And they, of course, can't talk badly about the Capitol because then the Capitol is going to get them, right? So Peeta wants to know how she knows this girl, and they end up going up to the roof. That's where you find out that there's this invisible barrier so nobody can jump off or escape. And then they end up going around the corner to this, greenhouse type of thing that's above the building. And it has constant noise. So they're able to talk here without feeling like they're being monitored because they're talking quietly enough to where the sound of wind chimes would block out anything that they're saying. So they feel like they're able to talk more critically about the Capitol and they're not going to get caught for it. And I'm sorry I didn't mention that before. That is totally my bad. I forgot it happened. But the reason I bring that up is because now we get to a point in the movie where Peeta and Katniss are both talking about, hey, how can we show up the Capitol? How can we show them that we're not pieces in the game? And going back and forth about that, he's still worried about who he is as a person and how he can show that that's still him despite anything that they might be going through during these games. And there's just no caution when they're talking about it. They're in a building provided by the Capitol, in the Capitol, in a building that's specifically for the districts and for the games. So you would assume that it's constantly being monitored, but there's not really any talk of that in the movie at all. They exist kind of freely in the movie. They're not especially worried about being monitored, but in the book, it's a constant thought that anything they do could be broadcast. So they're very aware of what they talk about, whereas in the movie, they're here in their apartment, it's completely quiet, and they're talking about how can we fight back against the Capitol? How can you show the Capitol that they don't own you when the entire, basis of this movie is the Treaty of Treason and how the Capitol has these games so that the districts know that they can't rebel, so that they know that the Capitol has all the power. How can you possibly say all of that openly and not fear consequences in the slightest? And they get away with it, so it's clear that there is no monitoring in the building, but I feel like there should be. That's something that matters a lot in the book, and it doesn't come up here, so now they're just talking openly, and they have no fear of getting in trouble for it. The night ends, they both go off to bed, and in the morning, they get ready for the games. Okay, welcome to the final part of this video. We're going to get into the actual games now. I'm going to do it a couple days in the book, a couple days in the movie. We'll go back and forth, and eventually we'll make it to the end of this story. So we're starting off in the book. It's the morning of the game. So they're about to go into the arena. At this point in the book, Haymitch and Effie have already split off. They're going to go try to get sponsors. So this is just Katniss and Cinna alone getting ready for the games. She wakes up and Cinna leads her up to the roof where this hovercraft comes by, and then when she grabs onto a ladder that's hanging off of it, it immediately freezes her entire body. She's not able to move at all. And when this ladder lifts her up, she gets a tracker injected into her arm, and that's going to allow the game makers to see everything that she's doing in the arena. And then they bring her back down, she has some food with Cinna, and then they get ready to go into the arena. Her outfit in the book is described as tawny pants, a green blouse, a hooded black jacket that goes down to her thigh, soft leather boots, and then her district token pin, that Mockingjay pin, which again is that gift that she received from the mayor's daughter because everybody's allowed to have one token from home, and that's what she chose to bring with her. The vibe is not great. Everybody is just sitting quietly, and before she heads off, Cinna says that if he could bet on somebody, he would bet on her, his girl on fire. She gets loaded up into this clear cylinder, which takes her up to the arena. And at this point, the tributes know that they have 60 seconds to take a look at their surroundings to see what's up before the games officially begin. If you are to step off of your platform before those 60 seconds, you will explode, and that's the end of you. So she looks around, she sees this ring of contestants around the cornucopia in the middle, which is full of supplies that could be very useful in the game. Stuff like weapons or food or, really anything that you could need to survive. There's flat ground around them, and then further off in the distance, she can see a cliff forwards, and then to her right there's a lake, and to the left there's this piney forest that goes around behind her. So half of the arena seems to be this giant forest, there's a cliff that leads to who knows what, and then there's this giant river, the source of water, which some of the earliest advice that she received was to find a source of water, so this is something to keep in mind. Obviously, it's right where everybody is right now, so it might not be a viable source of water, but it's something to keep in mind, right? And despite the fact that Haymitch had advised her to just run right away, don't go for the cornucopia, you want to get out of there as fast as you can, she sees what's out there and she's very tempted to run for it, and she thinks she's fast enough. Because we've already kind of assessed the competition and we know that there are not all the strongest physically, at least. So Katniss thinks, especially with her background of hunting, she's very sure that her body could carry her there faster than it would take some of the other tributes. So she might be able to grab a pack of food and then run away before they get to her, but is it worth the risk? Specifically, she sees a bow that's sitting out, and that would give her a huge advantage because of her ability that none of the other tributes really know about. So is it worth it to run out and grab this thing and potentially get into a battle a lot sooner than you anticipated, but if you get out, then you have a very useful weapon? Or do you run off and then somebody else gets to have the bow? She's thinking of all of this in the 60 seconds before the game starts, but at the very last second, she looks around and she catches Peeta's eye, and he gives her the smallest little head shake, and she interprets this to mean, don't go after the bow, listen to what Haymitch said, get out of here. And that causes her to hesitate, so when the 60 seconds are up, she doesn't run straight away, and that makes her lose her opportunity. But she does still want something. She doesn't want to go off without any resources at all, so she grabs this kind of useless looking piece of plastic. She gets a little bit of bread, and then she also gets a backpack. It's this bright orange backpack that she picks up, and as she's running away, the girl from District 2 throws a knife, because that's what she's good at, and it hits the backpack, which is very lucky for Katniss because it means that now she has another weapon. She has this knife in the backpack that she can take with her. And that brings us into the woods, which Katniss is very familiar with. Obviously, that's the environment that she's grown up hunting in. So she's just keeping up a steady pace. She's trying to get as much distance as she can from the other contestants in the arena. She did lose the bread that she had picked up when she was running away, but she still has the knife, she still has the backpack, and she still has this piece of plastic. And this is the start of her search for water, which is vital for survival. And as she's walking through the forest, they have 11 cannon booms go off, which there's a cannon that goes off every time a tribute dies, but because so many people are going to die in the initial bloodbath, they tend to hold off until after the chaos is finished. So the battle is over, everybody that would die in the initial fight has died, and they announce that that's 11 out of the 24 tributes are already gone. But you don't get to find out who died until the end of the night, where they'll project the tribute images up into the sky. She doesn't want to stop because obviously she doesn't want anybody else to catch up to her, but she does unpack her bag just to see what she grabbed, and she lays out what was inside. It's a thin black sleeping bag that reflects body heat, a pack of crackers, a pack of dried beef strips, a bottle of iodine, a box of wooden matches, a small coil of wire, a pair of sunglasses, and a half-gallon plastic bottle with a cap that's for carrying water, but there's no water inside of it. This bottle is empty, but she sees a rabbit running by, and she assumes that means there has to be a water source nearby, because there wouldn't be animals surviving off the land if there's no water for them to go to. Though, of course, this land is completely made up by the capital, so who's to say if that's even a real rabbit or if it needs the usual things to survive, or maybe it was just placed there and doesn't actually need to rely on the land because it only just started existing in this location. It's not a for sure sign, but it's something that she goes off of. That brings us to night 1 of the game. She sets some snares just in case she can catch food before morning. And then the tributes are projected up on this big hovercraft, like invisible hovercraft above the arena that lets her know who the 11 tributes are that had died that morning. She sees that Peeta has survived the first day, which gives her some conflicting feelings because obviously she's happy he's alive just because they were kind of teammates throughout all this. But also every day that he's alive is another chance where she might have to kill him. So at the end of night 1, we have 13 survivors. We have the 5 people that are the careers, the people that have been training for this, so District 1, District 2. And then I think one person from District 4 is also part of this pack. We have Foxface, the girl with the red hair, Thresh and Rue from District 11, and then Peeta and Katniss from 12, and then 3 others that aren't named. Katniss tries to get some sleep, but she wakes up during the night because somebody has made the terrible decision of starting a fire, which at night makes you immediately noticeable, and the careers very quickly find this person and take her out. Katniss sees that it's 5 people working together. There are 3 boys and 2 girls, but when they get closer, she realizes that actually one of them is Peeta. The group is walking and they end up going very close to where Katniss is hidden up in a tree where she's sleeping, and Peeta realizes that the cannon didn't go off, which means that this tribute girl is still alive, so he goes back to deal the killing blow. And while Peeta is away, all of the rest of the careers are talking about how they're gonna use him to try and find Katniss. They're gonna use the lover boy to try and find his girl because she's the real threat out of the 2 of them. And of course, Katniss is mad about this because of all people to team up with, sure, it might be beneficial to team up with the careers, but what a betrayal. But then at the same time, she's not sure where Peeta's alliances are because it turns out he hasn't revealed Katniss's skill with a bow. They still don't know, so she has an advantage there, where if she happens to have access to the tool, she'd be able to take them out because they're not expecting it. It seems like the careers are trying to use Peeta to find Katniss, but Peeta is not disclosing all the information that would be helpful, so is he really on their team or is he trying to use them just to survive a little bit longer? That brings us to a very short day 2 of the book Hunger Games, where she wakes up, she finds that there's one rabbit in a snare that she had set the previous night, and she shows it off to the cameras that she knows are around just because she wants the sponsors to know that she's resourceful. She wants them to know that she can fend for herself if that's what's needed, so that maybe they'll see that she's strong and they'll be rooting for her and then they'll send her more things. But at this point, after a full day of walking through the forest, she is pretty thirsty, and at one point she's so desperate for any type of liquid that she goes to eat some berries, but upon closer inspection, they're kind of red and evil looking. She doesn't really know if they're safe or not, so she doesn't risk it and she keeps going. Because the last thing you'd want in a situation like this is to go for something that seems so innocent and then that's what takes you out on day 2. This is another full day of walking through the forest. She doesn't find any water. At the end of the night, she climbs up into a tree to sleep again, and the only tribute that had died that day that's projected up is the girl from District 8 that Peeta had killed during the night. That brings us already to day 3 of the games. At this point, dehydration is setting in, and Katniss is not feeling well at all. Even when she wakes up, she barely has the strength to move from her resting spot, and she ends up falling out of the tree rather than jumping down. She's getting kind of mad at Haymitch at this point just because it's day 3 and she hasn't received any sponsor gifts, and she feels like she could die just from a lack of water, so why isn't Haymitch sending anything down? But she chooses to interpret this as Haymitch saying that there's water nearby, because if there wasn't, surely he would be doing something about it. She's moving recklessly at this point. She's not really paying attention to her surroundings. She's not moving with caution. She's just trying to take another step forward. She's just trying to find anything that could help her survive. And eventually she ends up fully just falling into the ground, and she's too weak to even stand up. She gives in. She's like, this, honestly, all things considered, is not a very bad way to go out. But before she dies, she realizes that she has landed beside some mud, and mud means water. So just as she's about to give up and let herself fade out into the earth, she finds a running source of water. She uses the iodine packets that she had in the backpack, and she purifies some. She waits the agonizing hour that it takes to make sure that the water is safe to drink, and then finally, after 3 days, she has her water. She's feeling better, but obviously still pretty weak and tired, and nobody has died this day, so she's kind of calmed down. She's just letting herself have a moment, and when she climbs up to get into a tree to get some rest, she is rudely woken up by the entire forest being on fire. So she has to jump down from the tree, take all of her stuff, and run as the entire forest has this wall of fire that seems to be chasing her down. And it's unclear where it's coming from, but it's obviously not natural, so it seems like it is something that the game makers have sent in. She kind of figures that it has to be the game makers moving everybody together or trying to keep the games interesting, which is something that they tend to do. And she's just blindly kind of following the animals that are running away because she's trusting their survival instincts. So if they're going a certain direction, they're probably going away from fire. Remember, Katniss has not had water for 3 days. All she had is that little bit just now. So she's still feeling pretty weak from all this running, and as she's trying to get away from the wall of fire, she's thinking to herself that maybe she can circle back around because it's not like the wall of fire can extend forever, so surely she would be able to find a spot where it stops and then maybe make her way back around to the water so that she can still have water, which it took her 3 days to find. But before she can do that, the forest starts shooting fireballs at her, as if things couldn't get any worse. The fireballs are only about the size of an apple, but they're very powerful. Upon contact, they will fully set you aflame. If you get hit in the wrong spot, it is going to be over for you so fast. She knows that specific areas of the arena will be rigged with traps like this, so she has just walked into the fireball zone of the arena, and if she can just get out of this part of the forest, she can probably get away. But as she's running away, at least 6 inches of the bottom of her braid gets burned off, and then while she's assessing this, she gets hit in the leg with another fireball. It hits her on her right calf, her pants are burning, and she has to pull them off with her hands, so now her hands have burns on them, and she just takes a moment to kind of think about the irony of her title being the girl on fire to now literally being on fire in the arena. Just not good. It's one thing after another. So she's got this really big burn on her leg now from where she got hit with the fireball. She's missing half of a pant leg, and both of her hands are burned from where she had to pull the fabric off. And then the attack seems to stop, which is not necessarily a good thing because she knows that the game makers are trying to manipulate things to keep things exciting, so if the attack from nature stopped, it probably means there's another tribute nearby. And that brings us to day 4 of the games, where after a little bit of rest and a lot of running, she is just looking at the surroundings. She's trying to figure out, is there somebody nearby? And it's really hard to see what's going on just because everything in the forest is smoky from all the fire. She makes it to a little pool of water and she's assessing her wound, she's cleaning everything off. She had to cut off a large portion of her jacket, which went down to her legs because so much of it was burned. But she still keeps the top half because she's benefiting from the hood. And this is most of a lazy day for her. It seems like, at least for the moment, she's safe, so she spends a lot of time just waiting in the water, letting her body cool down, trying to take care of the wounds as best as she can without really any supplies to do that. But she's still paying attention to her surroundings. She still knows that something could be coming for her, so when she hears footsteps, she's already ready to run. She hears footsteps coming for her, she makes a run for a tree and ends up climbing it way before this group can get to her. And it turns out that the people who found her are the 5 careers plus PETA. They're threatening her, they're yelling a bunch of stuff, they want to get her, and they just can't. They can't get up into the tree where she is. She got too much of a head start and she's too good of a climber. So you have a career guy trying to climb the tree, but he's too heavy and he falls. And you have somebody else who's just not very skilled and they try to shoot her because, hey, by the way, the career's got the bow after all. But they don't know how to use it, so they can't even hit her. And the whole time, while this is happening, Katniss noticed that PETA is almost trying to avoid eye contact the whole time, and it's like, you're the one who's betraying me right now. You're the one with this bad group, and you can't even look me in the eyes. So there's a lot going on here, but Katniss is safe up in this tree, and it seems like nobody is even gonna get close to touching her. The careers are trying to reach her any way that they can, but PETA suggests, hey guys, what if we just wait here? Because she's stuck now. She can't come down. We're gonna get her the second she lands on solid ground. They're tired, they were chasing her. We'll just wait it out and see what happens in the morning. So they all settle in for the night, including Katniss, but she's far too hurt to sleep. Her leg is really messed up, it's not feeling good, and while she's sort of waiting this night out, she notices that there are eyes looking at her from another nearby tree. And at first she thinks maybe it's just a wild animal, but she looks a little closer and realizes that it's Rue, the little girl from District 11, watching her from another tree. And Rue points above Katniss to let her know that there's this wasp nest above her that could come in handy. And we learn through Katniss's narration that this is probably a nest of tracker jackers, which is another thing that was created by the Capitol. Kind of similar to wasps with at least their appearance, but a lot more aggressive. Once they find a target, they will stick to it, and if you get stung, you can have severe hallucinations and death if stung too many times. And Katniss realizes that her only way to get out of the situation where all the careers are waiting below her is gonna be to drop this nest on them. She decides that the best time to do this without getting all of their attention is to wait until the anthem is playing and to wait until all of the dead tributes from the day are being shown. Because while you see the projections up on the screen, the anthem is playing, so they wouldn't be able to hear if Katniss is chopping a branch off a tree. But it's another day where nobody has died, and she's not able to fully cut the tree branch down before the anthem stops playing, so she has to stop for the night or else they'll hear what she's doing. She climbs back down to the little bed that she has up in the tree, and she's gonna wait until morning to finish cutting the nest down and to drop it onto the careers, but before she goes to sleep, she sees a sponsor gift. Haymitch managed to get her some ointment that immediately soothes the burn on her leg and on her hands, and she feels really grateful to know that she's not alone out here. Even in this situation where it seems so impossible that she can get out, you have 5 of the best hunters below you, she still has people on her team. And that's where I'm gonna stop in the book for now. That brings us to the start of day 5 in the games. So now we can really quickly go over to the movie. But if you thought the book went fast, the movie speed runs these first couple of days. So in the movie, Haymitch never went a separate way. He is walking her pretty much up to where she's getting sent off. And he gives her the advice that we already know in the book, which is just to stay away from the cornucopia, don't go into the initial bloodbath. Even if you see a bow, don't go for it. Find high ground, find water, and if you step off early from the platform, you explode. Kind of all the basics that we just have heard throughout her preparation in the book. And Katniss is alone with Haymitch in an elevator as they're having this chat. He gives her a little smile and he's encouraging, he says that she can do this, and then she is loaded up onto a hovercraft with all of the other tributes. So they're all strapped into this one hovercraft together, which is where she gets her tracker injected into her arm. So that part is similar where they're on a hovercraft when it happens, but I mean, I can't imagine going and being shipped to the arena with all the other tributes in the same aircraft with you. Like, what an uncomfortable ride that would be. She is then taken to a private room where she meets with Cinna, who is preparing her for going into the arena, and the outfit that she gets is, she goes and meets up with Cinna, who is preparing her to go into the arena, and in the movie, the outfit that she has is a black shirt, a black jacket, and then she has the Mockingjay pin hidden, like, within a secret flap on her jacket, as if she's not supposed to have it in the arena, which I don't know how they would have been able to sneak something in unregulated. In the book, it's very clear that everybody is allowed to have something from home and that everything is monitored. So, like, there's somebody who has a ring that can secretly turn into something stabby, right? So in the book, they aren't allowed to bring in secret weapons, and it's all monitored, it's all regulated, and her pin almost doesn't come in because it could potentially be used as a weapon, but it ends up being allowed. Whereas in the movie, it seems like it's a secret that she has it at all, which would also mean that she really shouldn't be able to have it visible at any point during the games, or else it would be a clear violation of the rules because she brought in some outside thing. So I don't really know what's up with that because Cinna puts it on the jacket like it's a secret. And it really shouldn't be. It has no reason to be. There's a countdown. She enters this clear tube. He says he would bet on her. That part is all pretty similar. And then she rises up and goes into the arena. And I would say this, I mean, it looks really cool. You still have the cornucopia in the middle. You have this big flat land. You've got the trees behind them. I, in my head, pictured it to be a full circle of tributes around the cornucopia, but in the movie, it seems like it's just a half circle, and they're all around the front of the cornucopia, which I guess would make sense so that nobody has the advantage of being at the mouth of it versus behind it and having to run around. But she does see a bow on the ground, and she's thinking about it, but she sees Peeta shake his head, and that reminds her that she's not supposed to go for it, which at this point, she sees him at the 8-second mark, which, sure, is not a lot of time, but in the book, she sees him shake his head at the very last second, and that's why she pauses. That's why she hesitates, and that's why she misses her opportunity. But in this, she had a lot of time to consider what Peeta's implications were with that handshake and whether or not she wanted to act on it. So it seems like a lot more of a conscious decision to not go for the bow. She watches Peeta run off into the woods, and then she goes in for a bag again, and this bag is not anywhere near as bright orange as it's described in the book, because in the book she's talking about how it's this giant target on her back and she has to cover it with mud and all this stuff. But in the movie it has like hints of orange peeking through, and it's largely just a black bag. She still is running away, gets hit in the bag with one of Clove's knives, the girl from District 2, but she makes it off into the forest. And I will say, just like, the movie is so good, and I'm gonna say this like a couple more times, I think. The music and the way that this scene is portrayed, it is perfect. The way that the audio from the actual fighting is kind of cut out and you just have music, and it feels so disconnected from what's going on, and you're seeing all of these different bodies and the different people that are fighting. This movie is so good at capturing the horror of something like this while still feeling so totally disconnected from what's going on. These are children fighting each other to the death, and you can watch that and you can see the brutality and you can know just how terrible of a thing it is, but there's still an audience that's watching it. There's this looming feeling that none of it is real, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the music is playing over just no sound of what's actually going on. And you obviously don't want that to be a real thing that you're watching, but seriously, I am so impressed by how these movies portray the horror of the story. As Katniss is running away from the cornucopia, she's already in the forest and she runs into Foxface, the girl with red hair. They both crash and fall to the ground, but instead of fighting, they both run off their own directions. So it's clear that neither of them are really up for confrontation like that. They both just want to survive. Katniss keeps running for a little while and then she sits down on a log to examine what's inside of the backpack. And from what I could see, it's a rope, an empty bottle, a tarp, a wire, and then some matches. And then the cannons are going off. Katniss counts 12 that have died, but she goes straight into survival mode after that. She's making sure she has food and water, because right away she finds mud and moss and she finds a running source of water, so that's not an issue in the slightest for her. She fills up her bottle, she drinks straight from the ground, so I guess there's no need for filtration here. There's no concern over whether or not this water is actually safe to drink. And then it's kind of hard to see what even happens here, and I had to ask my friends what was going on, but I think at this point she builds a trap, gets a squirrel or some other small animal, cooks, and then eats it, which also she had made kind of a fire to cook this thing, but I guess that's not a concern. And it's like, you could argue that the issue with fire is that if you do it at night, you can see that the fire is glowing, but I would argue that during the day, smoke is very easy to identify in the sky. So I guess if you're all in a forest, it might be harder to see it because you can't really see the open air as much, but if you're like a little ways away from the forest, you'd be able to very clearly see smoke coming up. Am I silly for thinking that? I feel like she just broke rule 1 immediately and nobody bats an eye. Whatever. She stomps out the ember, she climbs up into a tree, gets herself strapped in, and she's going to bed, but she hears this whirring next to her, and she looks into a tree where there is a camera in one of the holes of the tree. It's very much giving Beetleblade from Maze Runner, but then we get to see a glimpse into the Game Maker room where everybody is watching these screens, they're observing everything that's happening in the games, and they're also able to manipulate the environment, which we'll see a little bit later. And then the anthem is playing, and all of the fallen tributes are broadcasted up into the sky, which in this, it is this giant dome that's over the entire arena, and you can see the projection up on the dome, and you can also, when you're in the Game Maker's room, see the dome, because they have a miniature arena in front of them that they're able to manipulate. So you can see the giant dome and how it's covering the arena, and I don't know if, I guess in the movie they know that it's a manipulated sky as well, and that they know that they're not in the open, but in the book, she's talking about it, how there's an invisible hovercraft that's presenting the fallen tributes, because it seemed like when she was talking about it, it's an open sky with an invisible hovercraft. So if there's something I missed there, let me know. But in the movie, it is very clearly this dome that's over the entire thing. And then at night, the same thing happens where a girl nearby lights a fire, and you see Katniss shake her head with disapproval, and that's where I'm like, why were you lighting a fire in the first place? Is it just because it was daytime and so you're immune to anybody seeing you? Like, what does that mean? I can see a fire when it's daytime, but the careers from District 1 and District 2 take this girl out immediately, which brings us to 13 dead within the first 12 hours. And then as the career pack gets closer to Katniss, we can hear Glimmer, who's one of the career girls, making fun of how the person who lit the fire was begging for her life, which is less impactful because we didn't hear that. We heard, I mean, honestly, I don't even know if we heard anything from this girl. We saw Katniss shaking her head at the fire, but I don't really know if we heard what was going down. We just see the careers making fun of her. And then we get the same reveal of Peeta being with this group, and they're using him to find Katniss and all this stuff, but the difference is that Peeta doesn't go back to do the final blow because in the movie, the girl has already been killed. And I do think that changes things a little bit. The idea that in the book, Peeta was already so capable of taking somebody out on his own, which sure, at that point, maybe after whatever they had done to her, it was a mercy killing, but like, it still applies. That's still a major thing for this character to be going through that just isn't included in the movie. And then Katniss wakes up on day 2, she's moving through the forest, and we see Seneca, the main game maker, talking about how Katniss is getting kind of close to the edge of the arena because it's this giant dome, it's got big walls, she's reaching the end of it, and they say she's around 2 kilometers away from the nearest tribute. So to get some more action into the games, they set up this giant firewall. And as they're plotting this, she again gets up into a tree, she goes to sleep. That's her day 2. Like, that's it. She wakes up, she walks around, they notice she's getting far away, and then she gets in a tree to go to sleep. And then she wakes up on day 3 to this giant wall of fire that Seneca was talking about. There are no animals for her to follow, so she just starts running aimlessly through the forest. And then we can see the game makers sending fireballs at her. They can specifically control where the fireballs are coming from or where they're going to. So it's not necessarily a zone in the arena that is able to do that. It's something that the game makers can kind of manipulate at will. Like, they can put any threat wherever they want, regardless of if you're in that area or not. At least that's how it comes across. And at one point, they don't like the direction that Katniss is running in, so Seneca says to one of the other game makers and says, hey, can you drop a tree right there in front of her? So they drop a flaming tree and it falls in her path, and then she has to run a different direction. And it's like, in the book, they are definitely manipulating the arena, but I don't know if they have that level of control. She does get hit with a fireball on her upper thigh, and she rolls out of the way before another one fully takes her out. At this point, she's really disoriented from all the smoke and from all the running, but of course not from the dehydration, because she managed that water problem easily. She finds water and immediately jumps in, which I feel like in the book, she went in with a lot more caution because she obviously has this giant burn on her leg, which is kind of intimidating to submerge something like that in water. It's obviously going to be a very intense feeling, so you might want to ease yourself into it, but in this, she sees water and she jumps straight in. And then we see Seneca telling the game makers to get a cannon ready because he's assuming she's about to die, because immediately around the corner are all the careers and Peeta. They see her almost immediately after she lands in the water, so she has to swim back out of the water and keep on running, which I would say means she has a lot less of a head start, because in the book she heard them coming and that gave her a reason to start running before they saw her. She knew that they were going to see her and she had the opportunity to run away before they could start. But in this, they see her while she's still in the water, so she doesn't really have any type of head start on them besides the fact that they're a little bit farther away. But especially after the massive burn on her leg, I would assume she is not faster than them, so I'm not sure how she got away, but she still manages to get up into a tree. And I would say all of this plays out pretty much exactly as it does in the book. She's up in the tree, they can't get to her. Cato tries to climb it, but he's not a very good climber, or he's too heavy, or whatever excuse you want to give. He can't get up the tree. Glimmer tries to shoot with the bow, but isn't very good at it. If anything, like, the only thing that really changes is the fact that Katniss is able to get away a lot easier, and her wounds aren't really addressed. Like, she's able to climb, and she doesn't seem to have a lot of discomfort from the giant burn in her leg, and her hands aren't burned because her pants weren't really on fire from the fireball, so she didn't need to touch the flaming fabric to get it off of her skin, so her hands are fine, she's able to climb with them. And then the same conversation happens where Peeta says they can just leave her up there, they'll rest for the night, and they'll deal with it in the morning. And then something else that we get in the movie that we don't really see at all in the book is we get a glimpse of Haymitch in the Capitol feeling bad for Katniss and feeling sorry that her leg is hurt or whatever. He doesn't really say anything, but you can see how he's watching the events take place. We see Katniss up in the tree rinsing her wound off with the bottle of water that she has, and for some reason she pours water on it, which I would think is cleaning the wound off, and then she just, like, pulls her sleeve up like this and tries to, I don't know, dry the, like, what is she doing? I don't know if that was her attempt at cleaning the wound where she's rinsing it off and then drying it, which I don't know really that you would need to dry it, especially if you have nothing to bandage it up with. I can't think of what else she would be trying to do in this instance, but to me it looks like she poured water over it, which gets it as clean as it's gonna get in a situation like this. And then she takes her dirty and then she takes her dirty sleeve and rubs it all over this open wound as if that's necessary at all. Like, I really don't know what the purpose of her doing that was, because she's obviously in pain from doing it. It doesn't feel good, it doesn't really help anything, and I can't imagine that it would make the wound any better, like heal any faster, anything like that. If anything, it's just rubbing dirt in the wound that you have just rinsed off with fresh water. But then you see a sponsor parachute come down and she gets this tub of medicine, but in the movie, all of the sponsor gifts come with a note from Haymitch, and this one says, "Apply generously and stay alive." And these notes make me very angry. We kind of already addressed it, like how when Katniss wasn't receiving water from Haymitch, she interpreted that to be, there has to be water nearby because otherwise he would be helping me. She has this understanding of Haymitch in the book that it has to be more explicitly stated in the movie because we're obviously not inside of Katniss's head, but it's still frustrating to see. And we'll get into that a little bit more when she gets some other gifts on the later days. That brings us to day 5 in the book, where at this point, Rue has pointed out the nest, she has cut down 3/4 of the branch, and she's just waiting until morning to drop this nest of tracker jackers onto the careers that are sleeping below her. She tries to get a message over to Rue to let her know that, hey, I'm gonna do this thing, so you should get away while you can, because she doesn't want Rue to die, at least not like this. But she is okay if Peeta gets it, because at this point he's betrayed her, so he can go out with the careers. And I think a really interesting detail is while she's looking at this nest, while she's getting ready to drop it on the career, she notices that the tracker jackers are not very active. There's not a lot of them out of the nest, and they're not really reacting to her doing stuff to their branch, and it's because of all the smoke that was around from the forest being on fire. They're still waking up from the haze of that, so they're not reacting as much to her being near the nest. She goes back up, she finishes sawing the branch down, and as the nest is going down, she gets stung 3 times from tracker jackers that are nearby or maybe flew out of the nest as it's falling, but the rest of them fall down with the nest, which does make its mark. It hits the careers. Some of the pack goes and runs for the lake so they can submerge their bodies and not get totally demolished. But Glimmer, who is the girl from District 1, and then one of the tributes from District 4 are taken down by these bugs. Katniss manages to get down, she rinses off a little bit, and then she goes back for Glimmer's bow. At this point, Glimmer is bordering on unrecognizable. Her body is so swollen up from all the places where she got stung by the tracker jackers. And Katniss is trying to rush back because if a tribute dies in the arena, their body is collected by a hovercraft and they're taken away. So if Katniss doesn't hurry, then the bow is going to be taken away with the body. And it is explained earlier that the reason that they get taken up is because there was a tribute one time who was a little bit of a cannibal, and they didn't want that to come up again because while it's not technically illegal, it's not something that people really want to see. So it's easier to just avoid the problem entirely by getting rid of the bodies before they become food. So Katniss runs back to get the bow off of Glimmer. At this point, she's starting to hallucinate from the 3 places where she got stung, so it's a little bit of a trouble. She can't tell what's real or what's not. She's trying to pull a bow from a dead girl's hands, and this girl doesn't look human at this point, and it's almost like her body is disintegrating, which it's hard to tell if this is a hallucination or a real thing that's occurring. And then Katniss can start to hear the careers running back, either to see what's left, to maybe get the materials that they had left behind, or to see if Katniss is still around. And Katniss grabs the bow, but she can't get herself to run away in time until Peeta runs out before the rest of the career pack, and he tells her, like, what are you doing? You have to run now, they're gonna get you. And that gets her up onto her feet and she starts to run away. But obviously this is confusing because is Peeta working with the careers or is he trying to help Katniss? She runs away, she's hallucinating through the forest, and then eventually she blacks out. And then she wakes up, it's a new day. She's not really sure how many days have gone by, but she's feeling a lot better now because she has gotten herself a bow and arrow. So she doesn't feel as much like prey. She feels like she actually has a fighting chance now. And she goes straight back to finding food and water. Of course, you have to survive the nature first before you survive the tributes. And as she's preparing a meal, she hears a twig snap behind her because Rue has been watching from behind a tree. But Katniss has nothing against her. She's not going to kill the little girl, so she offers an alliance. And the two of them sit together, they share a meal, and they talk about what life is like in their districts because really every district is pretty isolated from each other. They're not supposed to know all that much about what goes on in the other districts because at the end of the day, the more they know about each other, the more likely they could be to team up against the capital. So if they're all isolated, if none of them know anything about each other, they're not really going to group up to fight together. But she learns about what life is like in the agriculture district, how Rue grew up and how she had to do certain farming activities maybe instead of going to school, or how she isn't well fed even though she works with food a lot because they're not allowed to eat what they work. Just little things like that where she's realizing how bad the conditions are across a lot of the districts. And it's interesting how this conversation is probably not going to be broadcast out as part of the games just because the capital wouldn't want this information getting out, so this is kind of a private moment that the two of them share. While they're sitting together, Katniss is going over, here's everything I have in my pack, and then that night the two of them share a sleeping bag to stay warm. There are no deaths on this day, and Rue had told Katniss that she was out for a couple of days, so I want to say this is the end of day 7. I don't know, something like that. If my numbers are off for the days, I apologize. I did my best. We know that the girl from District 1 and then the District 4 career were both killed, so that leaves 10 tributes left. And Rue also confirms that as she's been keeping an eye on everybody, Peeta is no longer working with the careers, he is just separated off, and at this point Rue also lets Katniss know that all of the career group has their resources piled up in one big space by the cornucopia, which gives Katniss this idea to go on the offensive instead of always trying to run away. And she thinks, well, what if we took away their resources? Because certainly they can't survive as well as we can. They're only winning because they have everything, so what if we took it all away? And then in the morning on what I think is day 8, they wake up to another cannon going off, which gives us our current survivors of the District 1 boy, both people from District 2, the District 3 boy, District 10 boy, both from District 11, and both from 12. And it's interesting that in the book, none of these district people are really named. Like, there's even, out of those district people, there's one more person that they don't even remember. So it's like, not only do we not know names, but we don't even know what district some of these tributes are from. And I think that's really cool, because especially with how back to back to back all of the events leading up to the games are, sure, they're not going to remember the names of everybody. In the movie, you kind of have Cato and Clove and Foxface established as the main enemies to look out for from very early on, whereas in the book you really only pay attention to Rue for a lot of it, and then you obviously have the career pack, but they're seen as this group of more powerful tributes rather than individuals that you need to be looking out for. And it's probably better that way if you consider them as just the tribute from district whatever rather than names, because that makes it more personal, which could make it harder to take them out later. So I think I prefer the disconnect from the books, where they're not super focused on who these people are as individuals. They talk a little bit more about the plan of how they're going to get the careers down, and Rue is talking about how it's the career pack, and then also they now have the boy from District 3 guarding their supplies, which Katniss thinks is kind of odd, because what reason does he have to be there? He hasn't been part of their group up until this point, so what are they gaining from him being there? And then Rue also at this point explains that the reason she trusts Katniss, especially from so early on, is because of the Mockingjay pin that she has on her, how it reminded her of home. And it's just this really sweet moment where you see a little girl thinking about something that she loves, and they're talking about this plan, and they've set up a couple different campfires that Rue is going to run around lighting, and that's going to sort of drag the careers away from their stuff so that Katniss can come in and hopefully destroy it all. And Rue says that she wants to have a signal for if she's safe but can't get back to their meeting spot. So Rue says, hey, if I'm safe but I just can't get to you, I will sing the song and the Mockingjays that are around the arena will pick it up and they'll carry that song to you, and that way you'll know I'm safe. So the iconic 4 notes that we know for this story comes from Rue trying to communicate with Katniss. And I think it matters a lot that it's Rue talking about this animal that means a lot to her, that she remembers from her own district, and that she knows how to use to communicate, because it's something that she did while she was working in her district. She was able to climb to the top of the trees, and then, I don't remember the details, but she could see something before the other people could, so she would signal to let everybody else know that the workday was done, or whatever it is. And it matters that she's the one who's singing it. It only really works one way, because Katniss is listening out for the Mockingjays singing this song so that she knows that Rue is safe. That's what it comes down to. They split off to do this plan. Rue is setting off the fires so that the careers run away, and then Katniss makes it over to their camp. She sees the District 1 boy, the District 2 girl, Cato, who's the District 2 boy, and then the District 3 boy, who's just some guy. He's entirely forgettable. He doesn't really come up anywhere else. Katniss notices that their supplies are kept suspiciously far away from where they're sitting, and she's trying to figure out what trap might exist here, because all of their supplies are covered in this giant net, but it doesn't seem like it would do all that much to keep people out. So she's not sure what's going on here, but something is clearly not right. She sees the smoke from Rue's first fire, and as the careers run off, they, I think, wonder if it's maybe Peeta that set the fire, but Cato mentions that he has hurt Peeta too badly, and there's no way this is Peeta doing it, which is not a great sign, because the last we heard was Rue saying that Peeta had split off. So it's clear that they took revenge for him siding with Katniss. And we also learn from this interaction that Cato specifically wants to be the one to kill Katniss, probably because she dropped the bugs on them and he's a little embarrassed over that. But the careers all run off to go chase this fire, and while they're gone, Foxface, who's the tribute that they had forgotten when they were listing off survivors earlier, runs out to steal supplies. She perfectly jumps in this really awkward way, gets what she needs. She just takes a little bit of everything so that they wouldn't even notice it's gone, and then she runs away. And this is showing her resourcefulness, where she knows how to get into whatever trap they've set. She knows how to take just enough to survive, but not too much to let them know what's going on. And it also lets Katniss know a little bit more about the trap, because at this point Katniss realizes that The District 3 boy comes from a place that specializes in technology and factory stuff and explosives, and he found a way to dig up all the mines that were around the initial platforms that the tribute stepped off of. He found a way to dig those up, place them around their camp, and then set them up again, so that if anybody tries to steal all the materials, they will hopefully explode. But Foxface found a way to jump around this trap, and now Katniss is plotting on how to maybe trigger it. And she ends up seeing this burlap sack of apples that's towards the top of the stack, and if she can perfectly tear the side of it, then all the apples will roll down in a way that will trigger a chain reaction of the explosives so that not just the ground, but also all the materials will explode. And it works. All the supplies are blown up, Katniss gets thrown back from the force of the blow, and then Cato runs back, the careers are running back, and Cato is so mad at what happened that he snaps the neck of the District 3 boy. He blames this kid for the trap being too good, because it's supposed to just keep people away, but instead it fully blew up everything that they have, which is probably not what they intended. And for a little bit, it seems like they assume whoever had blown this all up probably died in the explosion, that they just didn't hear the cannons because all of their stuff was exploding. So they figured at night they would see who did it. But when nobody but the District 3 boys announced that night, they realized that whoever blew up their supplies is still alive. There are 3 careers left, the District 1 boy, and then both from District 2, Foxface, and then all of District 11, all of District 12. And rather than trying to find Rue this night, Katniss just curls up in some leaves and goes to bed. They both survive the plan, so they'll just come back together tomorrow. Katniss wakes up on day 9 to distorted laughter because, again, she was very close to this explosion, so her hearing is messed up at this point. She has some hearing in her right ear, but her left ear is completely gone at this point, which is pretty troubling because as somebody who exists as a hunter, you rely on all your senses, and now she's missing 75% of one, I guess. It's disorienting, is what it is. She wakes up in the morning and she observes Foxface still trying to steal from what's left of the rubble because at this point the careers have decided that there's nothing worth saving, but Foxface, as resourceful as ever, is still finding things. And she seems kind of happy as she's doing it, which lets Katniss know that her plan to take the careers down a notch is kind of giving all of the tributes more hope, where if the careers don't have their supplies, then maybe everybody has a fighting chance now. Katniss realizes at this point that Rue should have returned from the third fire, wherever she ran off to at this point, and she's still not back, which is a little bit concerning. So Katniss gets up, but very quickly realizes there's nothing she can do. She obviously doesn't know where Rue could have gone off to. They have a plan on where they're supposed to meet up, so she just has to sit and wait it out. She goes into a tree and spends most of this day waiting for Rue, but as nightfall, she still hasn't heard anything. She gets down from the tree, walks over to the third campfire that they had set up, and realizes that Rue never even made it that far. She never lit this third fire, so clearly something went wrong. But as Katniss is assessing the situation, Rue sends out her bird call. She sends out her song through the Mockingjays, which lets Katniss know that at least for right now, she is safe, but just can't get to their meeting spot. Katniss starts to head towards the direction that the song came from, at which point Rue screams, and Katniss starts to run. She knows it could be a trap, but really what choice does she have? She has to save her friend, and this part is just devastating. And I can't even say it in a fun way. Katniss runs out into a clearing. Rue is yelling. She yells for Katniss, and right as Katniss gets out to where she can see her friend, Rue is on the ground, caught in a net, and before Katniss can even make a little move towards helping her, the boy from District 1 takes his spear and gets Rue through the stomach. Katniss is very quick and shoots him before he can even take the spear out, but at this point, it's too late. There is no way of saving Rue, and there's no reason for them to lie about what's happening, so they just kind of have this really sweet moment where Rue asks, did you at least get rid of all their supplies? And they at least have that little victory. And Rue asks Katniss to sing to her, which she's hesitant for a second, but also how can you say no? So Katniss sings her to sleep. And then Mockingjays carry the tune away as Rue's cannon goes off, and it is truly devastating. And this is kind of a major turning point in the story, where up until this point, Katniss has been very complacent, I guess, where it's like Gale and Peeta have both kind of let her know that they are against what the Capitol is doing, that they want to fight back, or that they want to escape, but they don't know how to, and every time she has shut them down immediately and been like, there's nothing we can do, there's no way that we can fight back, we just have to do it because it's the way that it is. And after watching Rue die, and after, like, coming face to face with the reality where little girls like this that have done nothing wrong are being killed, just for a show, she realizes that something isn't right. Up until this point, she's just been going along with what's happening, but after seeing something like this,
she gets a little bit more of a fighting energy. She says how it feels inadequate to hate the boy from District 1 who has done this because at the end of the day, it's the capital that she hates. Rue's death had forced her to confront her own fury against the cruelty, the injustice they inflict upon us. She wonders if there's any way to take revenge on the capital and thinks back to when Peeta was saying that he doesn't want to be owned or controlled by the capital. She wants to do something in this moment to make the capital accountable and to show them that they can't force these children or the people in the districts to do whatever they want, to prove that they're not just pieces in a game. So Katniss comes up with this idea of gathering a bunch of nearby wildflowers and placing them around Rue's body, which everybody is going to see. When they were talking about the districts earlier, it's possible that that conversation was cut out for broadcast because maybe people in the capital don't want everybody in the districts to know what goes on in District 11. So when Rue was talking about her home life, that might not be shown to everybody. Whereas something like this, where the body is going to be picked up by a hovercraft, everybody's gonna see this. And Katniss wants it to be seen, so she picks up a bunch of flowers and she decorates Rue's body before it's taken away. This is a statement in itself, because obviously they're all being sent here to take each other out, but she's showing that there is still humanity in them. It's a small little rebellion, but it shows that even now, this life still mattered. This is something that people should care about. She kind of wanders aimlessly through the forest until nighttime, where she gets a sponsor gift from District 11, which is unheard of. You never see districts sponsoring people that aren't from where they are, but it's a gift of a loaf of bread, and she knows from her time studying with Peeta, she knows a little bit about bread, enough to identify it as something that comes from District 11, and she chooses to interpret it as being kind of a thank you, or like they see the kind thing that she did for Rue and for the body and everything like that. After Rue dies, Katniss takes like a night to mourn and to just kind of sit and be sad and reflect, and then in the morning as the sun is coming up, she thinks about Prim, and that is enough to give her the strength to keep on moving because she doesn't want Prim to watch her die. And at the end of the day, Rue kind of reminded her of Prim, so now it's like she has twice as much to fight for because she initially went into this just going and telling Prim that she was going to do her best to survive. And of course, she still wants that to be true, but now she kind of has this extra layer of motivation where she watched somebody who reminds her of home die when she really didn't need to, and now she has more of a reason to want to fight back against all of this. So she goes back to where Rue's body was, she collects whatever she can, and she gets ready to avenge Rue's death. Because at the end of the day, not only is there a chance to survive, but there's a chance to truly be unforgettable now, and that's kind of what she's striving for. It's another very slow day in the games. She spends a lot of time reflecting on what she wants to do, and also thinking about the fact that she did do her first proper direct kill. She took out the boy from District 1, she shot him directly. And she thinks back on how Gale said that it's pretty similar to hunting animals, and he wasn't wrong. There are no deaths this night, but there are trumpets that go off with an announcement, which typically she's thinking about previous games, and she's saying how usually around this time in the games, they'll announce a feast where every tribute can go into one place. Usually it's just a way to get all the tributes together again, but it'll be a gathering where every tribute has something they need, and they can go to this feast and get it and potentially fight the other tributes if they show up. But rather than an announcement of a feast, this announcement is to say that there has been a slight change in the rules, and that if two survivors are from the same district, they can both be victors. This would only apply to either District 2, which still has Cato and Clove, or District 12, which is still Katniss and Peeta. And that brings us to part 3 of this book, which is called The Victor. But I am still going to take us a little bit farther into the book before switching back over to the movie, just because I feel like the movie at the end moves very, very fast, and the book kind of takes its sweet time. So when Katniss hears this announcement, she immediately is thinking of Peeta, and she says his name out loud, which isn't a part of the performance. She's just genuinely kind of grateful and thinking about this opportunity. She's convinced that they have to be allies, because at this point, he is the one that was playing up the whole romance thing, so surely it'll be advantageous to the two of them to work together. And she kind of makes this big show of smiling up to the cameras, which, again, in the movie, she directly was looking into one, which was in the tree, but in the book, it's kind of this constant thought that there are cameras observing her every move. And I think that level of hyper awareness where you just know that you're constantly being monitored is a lot more scary to think about versus in the movie where they know a general idea at least of where the cameras are. Like even in the book before they get into the games, they know that they're being observed, and in the movie that's not really something that's brought up. But at this point in the book, we are left with the two District 2 tributes, Foxface, Thresh, and then the 2 from District 12. And that brings us to, I think, day 11. She heads out and she's cautious, but she's excited to find Peeta because, of course, they can work together now. She remembers that Kato said he's pretty badly injured somewhere, and she assumes that probably means he's not able to move on his own. So he has to be hiding out somewhere close to water so that he can survive this long. She lights a random campfire and then heads off in the hope that maybe it'll be some sort of fiery diversion. And she goes to a stream and is walking along it to try and find any hint of Peeta hiding out there. Still, she's a bit disoriented because of the whole deaf in one ear thing from the explosion, but she's doing her best to look out for him. And then as she's moving along the water, she starts to see streaks of blood, which she assumes could be her injured lover, right? She almost gives up searching, but he starts talking to her from somewhere because he is almost fully camouflaged in the ground beneath her feet. He used his cake decorating skills to seamlessly blend into his surroundings with mud and plants and other things that somehow she didn't notice even though she was quite literally standing on top of him, so I don't really know. Again, what kind of cakes is this man making where he's able to do all this? She wants to wash him and assess his wounds and see what's going up, and he's kind of making a joke, and he's like, oh, well, we're still madly in love, so you can kiss me anytime. And she takes that as a joke, but I don't know if it really was. Regardless, he is too injured to move by himself. His leg is messed up, so she ends up having to do a lot of the work to roll him into the stream of water to try and get him cleaned off. And he's also got a pretty bad fever, whether it's because of the wound and maybe it being infected or just a result of the bad environment. He has a really bad fever, he has no appetite, so she's doing her best to take care of him with what little they have. And Katniss is not very comfortable with dealing with wounds. That's very much her sister's side of things. Prim is very much the healer of the family, but Katniss does her best to wash it down. She sees that Kato had cut Peeta's leg down to the bone. It is a nasty wound. She does her best to get it cleaned up, and they realize they can't really go anywhere in this state. He's not able to move on his own, so rather than trying to run away anywhere, Katniss finds a place that they can shelter in a cave. And she's sort of hopeful that Haymitch can send them medicine or send them something that's gonna help, but Peeta reveals that he hasn't received any sponsor gifts yet. And he says that Katniss is the favorite out of the two of them, which Katniss doesn't really believe because, Haymitch was rude for a lot of their earlier interactions, but Peeta says it's because Haymitch sees her and is reminded of himself. So they're in this cave together, they're hiding, they're waiting until something gets better. I don't really know at this point because either they're gonna get a sponsor gift and it's gonna help them out, or I don't know, because Peeta is infected, his wound is really bad, they're not gonna be able to do anything until it heals, and there's no real guarantee that it's going to heal at this point. So he tries to talk to her, reasonably, as he should, about what to do in case he dies, but she's having none of it. She kisses him to shut him down, and thinks about how it's overdue, considering how this whole performance is going, where if they're trying to play into the whole romance, this should have happened a long time ago. And then Katniss goes outside and sees a sponsor gift has come down, which is a little bowl of soup from Haymitch rather than medicine. And that lets Katniss know that this is a reward for the kiss, but it maybe wasn't good enough to earn them the medicine that they need. As if he's saying, keep up the act and you'll get better stuff. And it just hurts to read this perspective because she's saying how it might be difficult to play into it, how it's difficult to keep acting this way, but that Peeta seems like he's a natural. Leave the poor boy alone. I fear Peeta is not acting. She thinks about going up into a tree to hide for the night, but realizes that Peeta's obviously not going to be able to do that, so she goes and sleeps in the cave with him. The next day, day 12, his fever is broken, so he's doing a little bit better, but he knows that she didn't really sleep. She was up all night keeping watch, and he offers to keep an eye on things so that she can rest. And he strokes her hair as she falls asleep, which is such a genuine little moment of affection. He lets her sleep until well into the afternoon, and when she wakes up, she checks his wound. She realizes he has blood poisoning, and there's pretty much no chance that he's gonna get better on his own. They need medicine for this to get better. She makes some soup for them to have for dinner, and then Peeta asks Katniss to share a happy story, just so they have something to chat about and maybe so that they look like they're more interested in each other. And Katniss tells the story of how Prim got her goat, but cuts out all of the parts that maybe shouldn't be broadcast. And then this night is when the trumpets go off and they announce the feast where there's something for everybody. So now, it's kind of obvious that the thing that this pair needs is medicine, so that Peeta doesn't die, but she agrees not to go. Peeta says it's way too dangerous, you can't risk your life for me, all that stuff. She says she won't go, and he immediately calls her bluff and says, I know you're gonna try and do this, and if you try to go, I'm gonna drag my body over there and just start yelling until somebody kills me, so you better not go or else I will die. So if you stay here, then maybe we have a chance of surviving a little longer, but if you try to risk your life and go out there, I will make sure I do not live. And again, it's such an interesting addition to his character. Like, we see him going out and killing somebody when the careers couldn't do the job, and now you see him threatening to end his own life just to keep her there a little bit longer. Like, he's kind of a funny guy. He's kind of got a lot of depth if you really see him as a character, and I feel like a lot of that is taken away in the movie, which is so cool because even in the movie, he still feels like a full character. As night falls, it is just getting colder and colder, and they agree that the game makers are probably manipulating the temperature, making it extremely hot in the day and then extremely cold at night. And then as nighttime comes, Katniss goes outside and sees that Haymitch has sent another sponsor gift of some sleeping medicine, which at first she thinks is maybe actual medicine, but it's just a standard little vial of sleep medicine that you might see, which Katniss recognizes from home as something that can be very powerful if you have a lot of it. And she disguises the taste with some berries and some other stuff nearby and drugs Peeta so that he falls asleep for a good while. She gives him enough to know that he will sleep for a full day, so she has time to go out to the cornucopia when the sun rises to get the stuff and then to come back before he has any way to fight back at all. And this is kind of an evil thing to do because she knows that he doesn't want her going. And he can taste the medicine before he goes to sleep, so he realizes in his final moments what's happening, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. But it's like, if Katniss doesn't go, then obviously he doesn't get the medicine and he's going to die of blood poisoning. If she does go and he's awake, he's going to make sure he dies. So the only option that she has is to do her best to try and get the medicine for him while he's asleep. And she leaves knowing that if she fails this, District 12 isn't going to have a victor. If she doesn't get this medicine and get back to him, they're both gonna die. But as the sun rises, she goes over to the cornucopia where the feast is, and she's thinking about who might show up, because if it's something that everybody from every district needs, she's thinking Clove and Cato and probably Thresh will all show up, but Foxface tends to avoid direct confrontation like this, so she might stay away. And when she shows up to the cornucopia, there's actually nothing there, so it's a bit confusing because where's all the resources that they need? But right when the time comes, a table rises up from the ground that has everything, and before anybody can even react to this, Foxface runs in, grabs her bag, and leaves. She wastes no time getting what she needs and getting out of there. And then Katniss realizes her only hope is going next and trying to be as fast as she can, but she does get into a fight with Clove while they're going for their bags. She gets hit with one of Clove's knives directly above her eyebrow and starts bleeding all down her face, but it's not anything to take her out. There's a little back and forth which ends up with Clove pinning Katniss to the ground and pulling open her jacket to reveal that she's got just a lot of knives in there. And she's saying that Cato wanted to be the one to take Katniss out, but Clove is allowed to do it if she has fun with it. And she's sort of making jokes about how, oh, Loverboy's not gonna save you and all this stuff. And Katniss tries to lie and say, oh no, Peeta's right out there, he's gonna get me, like, no problem, but it's very obvious that that's not what's happening. And then Clove makes a joke about how they had killed Rue and how Katniss couldn't do anything to save her, and Thresh runs up and hears them mention Rue, grabs Clove and says, hey, what did you do to her? Obviously Thresh and Rue came from the same district, so even if they were competitors in this ring, Thresh did care about Rue. And the fact that Clove is making fun of the fact that they killed her, it just doesn't end well, does it? Thresh has a large rock in his hand, and he gives Clove one solid bash to the head, and her skull is dented, and she will not be recovering from this. She doesn't die immediately, but it's obvious this is not something she's coming back from, and Cato was too far away to do anything about it, and Katniss is worried that she's next, because now Thresh is very powerful and standing above her. But instead, Thresh looks at Katniss and says, hey, I'm gonna let you go just this once because I don't want to have to owe you anything, which is kind of a big feeling that Katniss has ever since the start of this book, where even when Peeta was throwing the bread in the rain, she always feels like she owes people things and that they're doing stuff for her and she's not giving it back. So like when Peeta threw her the bread way early in childhood, he got punished by his mom for that. And she received the bread, and this is obviously something she's really grateful for because it saved her that day, but at the same time, she feels like she needs to repay it. She needs to give something to Peeta, and instead they get thrown into these games, and now she really feels like she has no chance to repay that. So when Thresh says that he doesn't want to kill her this time because he doesn't want to owe her anything, this is him repaying that. She was kind to Rue, in exchange she gets to live, but just this once, and now they're even. And then Thresh runs away with not only his bag, but also Cato's bag, so that when Cato finally makes it over, he'll be more likely to run after Thresh instead of chasing Katniss, which gives her the chance to run away with her bag. She makes it back to the cave where Peta is staying, injects him with the medication, and then she passes out from probably blood loss because her head is still bleeding from where Clove sliced her at the start of their fight. And before we get into day 14, I would like to catch us up in the movie. We're really getting to the final stretch, so I want to make sure we're in a similar place. In the movie, we're back at the tree where she's about to drop the tracker jackers on them. I'm sorry for jumping around like that. It's the only way that makes sense to me, so you'll have to bear with me as we catch up. This is day 4 in the movie. The careers have all fallen asleep on the ground under Katniss. She's up in a tree, does not yet know that there's a nest above her. She wakes up after having applied the medicine from a sponsor onto her leg, and the burn is healed pretty good. She's feeling great. And at this point, she hears somebody going, psst, from a nearby tree and looks over and sees Rue, which she's only able to verbally signal because all of the careers have fallen asleep. In the book, the careers do fall asleep in the morning, but this is well after Katniss was told about what's above her. But Rue still signals, lets her know that there's this nest above her, and Katniss makes a plan to go for it. She doesn't do anything during the night with the anthem. She just goes straight for it in the morning, goes all in. And as we see Katniss cutting this branch down, we cut to Claudius and Caesar, the two announcers, explaining what tracker jackers are to the audience. And I think it's interesting that Claudius says they're very lethal, and Caesar says that they create searing pain, powerful hallucinations, and in extreme cases, death. Which, to me, contradicts extremely lethal, because I would think that means very deadly, versus Caesar saying that they cause death in extreme situations. You know what I mean? Not that it really matters. She gets stung a couple of times as she's cutting this nest down, because they're active. They are not sleeping. There is no lingering effect from the smoke. They're all very active at this nest as she's cutting it down, but again, it's a success. The nest falls onto all the careers. Glimmer is taken down, the girl from District 1, but everybody else gets away and makes it to the lake or whatever they're going to. And for the second that we see Glimmer after this attack, she is covered head to toe in bugs, and then the next scene they are gone and she's left with all these sting marks, and it's just, I mean, it's nasty, but it's not as bad as it was in the book. Katniss gets down from the tree, she's going for the bow on Glimmer's body, and at this point she's already hallucinating. She has no time to rinse off in any water or anything. She's already unwell. Glimmer's body is incredibly swollen, and Katniss is trying to grab the bow off of her body. I really like how it's edited and how you can tell how disoriented she is from the hallucinations. She still sees Peta running up and saying she has to go. She briefly, as she's running away, sees Caesar Flickerman in the forest talking about the tracker jackers, which is funny. And then I think she passes out. She's dreaming of her dad and the explosion that took him out. And then when she wakes up, she's covered in leaves because Rue, who is still hiding behind a tree, took care of her. Which I forgot to mention in the book, while they're sharing a meal, they do also share medications, so Katniss is able to share the medicine she had from the burn, and she's able to heal Katniss with these leaves. I didn't really mention that. So Rue is still helping here, it's just before they agreed on an alliance. She's just doing it to be nice. And then Katniss wakes up, they share a meal together, and Rue explains that she's been out for a couple of days, which, again, I'm guessing on the days here, I would say this is probably day 6 now. And she explains that she's already changed Katniss's leaves twice to help her heal from the sting wounds. During that time, Glimmer, the girl from District 1, and a boy from District 10 died, and she says how Peta is staying down by the river and asks if they are a thing, if their romance is a real thing, but Katniss just kind of laughs it off. And then Rue reveals the same thing that we already know from the book, that the careers have this giant pack of food down by the cornucopia, and Katniss has a plan to take it all out. They share a sleeping bag. Welcome to day 7. This is quite a long day that we have to get through. A lot happens on day 7. At the start of day 7, Katniss and Rue wake up and they establish this plan to light the 3 campfires on fire as a way to take the careers away so that Katniss can get to the supplies and find some way to take it all. Rue proposes a signal to say that the other person is safe, and then they whistle to the Mockingjays with that song that we know so well. Rue does a test song just to show Katniss what the Mockingjays are capable of, but in the movie, Katniss is the one that does the iconic 4-note thing. And they split off with a mutual understanding that they will use this signal to tell the other person that they are safe. Now, how this works with 2 people, I'm not entirely sure. This part, I would say, plays out fairly similarly, where Katniss goes over, she sees all the careers and the guy from District 3 with the pile of supplies quite a ways away from them. It looks suspicious. The careers see a fire that's lit and they run off to go see whatever it is. Foxface runs in, does this weird little hop and jump to get the supplies. There are 4 people here. So we see Clove and Cato, who are the 2 from District 2. We see the guy from District 1, and then we see somebody else who isn't Peta because it's established that he's by the river. but they don't really ever explain who this extra guy is. It's just somebody that the careers picked up along the way, I guess. And obviously from the book, we know who he is, what district he's from, but in the movie, we're not really given that context. We watch as the careers run off, they leave the one guy to keep guard, and then as Katniss is assessing the station that they're at, she's looking at the ground and notices that some things are piles of dirt. Like around all the supplies, there are just random piles of dirt. And then we cut to Claudius and Caesar narrating what's going on, and they say that one of the tributes was able to dig up the mines and reuse them to build a trap, and they wonder if Katniss is going to notice and all this stuff. And it's like, again, the narration from these guys is helpful since we can't get into Katniss's head. However, I would love to know at what point she realizes that this is the trap that she's facing, because while they're narrating it, they're wondering if she's gonna notice. So when does that click for her? When Foxface runs in, she grabs the supplies and she leaves. The guy that the careers had left to guard all the supplies hears something and vaguely walks off in that direction to follow her, I guess. Even though he never saw her taking supplies, so he doesn't know that anything's missing, so he's just kind of walking off because he heard a noise. Which I don't even know if he had stayed at the camp to watch guard or if he went with the careers in the book, because I know they still killed him at the end of it. They still blamed him, but I don't know if it's that they blamed him for the explosives going off in a way that they didn't want, or if it's that they blamed him for not keeping a better eye on things. I don't remember, but in the movie, they left him behind to keep guard, and then he ends up walking away into the forest. But then the same thing, Katniss sees this bag of apples on top of the supply pile, she shoots at it, and it sets off all the explosives. The careers come running back, so does the guy from District 3, Cato blames him, snaps his neck. So all of that plays out pretty much the same as it does in the book. But when they all run back, Katniss is still very much out in the open. She takes a second to back away after the explosion. I feel like they definitely would have seen her before she runs away, but whatever. And then as she's running away, she's doing the bird whistle to let Rue know that she's safe, or to call out to Rue, and it's like, the birds are picking up the song and then carrying it away, and then another Mockingjay will hear the song and then carry it farther away. And if you're trying to talk to somebody, I mean, this isn't really the type of communication that goes both ways if you're only using one signal, because the birds are gonna hear you singing that song and pass it around. So that might let Rue know that you're safe, but how are you gonna know if she's responding versus if the birds are singing your song back to you? And also in the movie, her hearing is, it seems to not be affected at all by the bomb that went off right next to her. She goes straight to running through the forest and goes to the third campfire where she realizes it was never lit. So she's running through the forest yelling for Rue, and she hears Rue yelling from somewhere in the distance, and I will say this yelling goes on for quite a while. I don't know how far away they were or why Rue was able to yell for so long. But Katniss is searching the forest. She eventually finds Rue trapped in a net, has enough time to sit by her, to fully cut her out of this net, and to hold her close. And then they just sit there holding each other, and they don't move at all. The guy from District 1 shows up and throws the spear at Rue, and Katniss shoots him, but it's too late because Rue already has a spear through her chest. Yes, it's still sad, and it's still a really terrible scene, but come on, guys, move. In the book, it is one thing after another where the second she hears Rue, she's running and she's pushing through the forest and she finds her on the ground. And the second she sees her on the ground, she doesn't even have time to react before Rue is dead. Whereas in the movie, there is a long while where Rue is yelling, where she would have called every career with the area. She would have been dead 10 times over before Katniss even found her. But then Katniss does have time to find her, fully cuts her out of the net, and then they just don't leave. It's like, what did you think the trap was for? Do you think that's just a part of the environment? Like, clearly somebody set this trap, and you've already been yelling for so long, they're gonna come back for you. It's obviously a really devastating moment in the movie, but it's hard to feel bad when they just made so many poor decisions back to back. It's kind of obvious that that's what was gonna happen. You didn't leave. You just blew up all of their resources and then acted as though it would be fine. Surely they have better survival skills than this, right? Like, they have to know they're in a dangerous situation. Why would they just sit there? And then in the book, they didn't try to lie and say, oh, you're gonna be okay, all this stuff. It was very straightforward. Did you destroy the supplies? Yes, I did. Sing me a song, and she's asleep. But in the movie, Katniss is still trying to tell Rue, you're gonna be okay, you're gonna be fine. And it's like, you know that's not true. Take one look at her. You don't stand a chance. Don't lie to her in a situation like this, because regardless, you're in the games. Maybe it's best if this is how you die, in the arms of your friend. You know you just did a really cool thing. Like, let her have this. Don't try to tell her that she's still gotta live. And I know, that's kind of a heartless thing to say, but I mean, really, there are worse ways to go out in these games. So it's kind of silly to have Katniss saying, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Especially when this whole situation was preventable if they had just gotten up a little sooner. The dialogue from this point on is fairly similar. Katniss sings to Rue as she's fading out, and then Katniss grabs the flowers and puts them around Rue's body. And it took this long in the movie for me to realize that they never airlift the dead tributes out of the arena, which could partly be because it's a giant dome. I don't know how that impacts all of this, but also how does that impact the story that Katniss is trying to tell, where if the body's not being airlifted, there's no reason why this sign of rebellion needs to be broadcasted. So are people seeing this? And if so, why? Why would the Capitol choose to broadcast this moment if it's a clear sign of rebellion against what the games are? In the book, they had no choice but to broadcast the body. If they're taking it out of there, they have to show that moment because it matters, I guess, to show the full ending of this tribute. But in the movie, if that's not something they do, then who is seeing this? And then as Katniss is walking away, she does the District 12 symbol that they do at the funerals. She does that to the camera, and then we cut to District 11. A lot of people are freaking out in the streets. It's this whole overnight thing where they're fighting back against the authorities, and I mean, they're just not having a good time because obviously everybody's upset that a little girl had to die. And I do like that we're getting a visual of how even now Katniss is sort of sparking this rebellion, but at the same time, why was she being broadcast in this moment? That's the type of rebellion that isn't mentioned in the book. We don't see how Katniss's actions are inspiring other districts, so it's a cool detail to add, and it definitely does set you up for the future movies and the future books and whatever. I'm not opposed. I just would like some more clarity on why they saw what they saw, because it's clearly not something that the Capitol would want to be going around, is my understanding. And then that brings us to, I think, the start of day 8. It's kind of hard to tell at this point because in the District 11 scenes, you can see it going to nighttime, so I don't know if it went to nighttime in the games as well, or if it's still the same day when we get back to Katniss, but I'm gonna act as if it's a new day and that she just spent the night mourning because I'm pretty sure that's what happens in the book. Again, excuse me if my days are a little bit off. Day 8 starts off with Seneca and Haymitch in the Capitol going back and forth about how to handle Katniss and how they should approach her and her being broadcasted, where Seneca is saying that they should kill Katniss for sparking what she did in District 11, but Haymitch says that they should give the district something to hope for, something to root for, and that can be young love, and that'll sort of distract them, I guess, from all the rage that they feel. Haymitch is saying give them a show, but also he's saying let Katniss live. He's trying to manipulate the situation to get them through the games, at least. And then we see Seneca bringing the same conversation up with Snow, who says that he doesn't like to root for an underdog, and that there are lots of underdogs in the farther out districts, but you don't want to root for them. You don't want to give them too much hope and too much power. So now Seneca is in this really awkward situation where you have the District 12 mentor saying that you should utilize them in a different way to tell this unique story, but you have Snow saying that you should shut it down. So he's gonna have to decide who he wants to listen to, if he wants to put on a show like Haymitch is suggesting, and if he thinks that's a wise thing to do, or if he wants to follow what Snow is saying and shut it down before it gets out of hand. And then Katniss is seen sitting in the forest. She's still probably mourning the death of Rue, which is why I'm a little uncertain about the time here. I don't know how long she spent just sitting there. But she's sitting. Claudius announces over the loudspeaker that there can now be 2 winners from the same district. This gives Katniss a new sense of hope, and she immediately runs off to try and find Peeta. And then she's walking along the stream because the last she heard from Rue is that Peeta is somewhere along the river. And as she's walking past, she sees blood on the ground and decides that could be him. And then as she's walking along the river, he reaches out with his mossy hand and grabs her, and she's, frightened for sure, as she should be, because this camouflage is incredible. He says his leg is hurt, and when she asks how, he responds with a sword, which is not very clear. I feel like in the book it's a lot more emphasized that it's a specific person who did this to him, but in the movie he's kind of vague about it, but whatever, you're in the games, you're bound to get hurt. Katniss tries to clean it, she tries to say that he's fine, they go back and forth about if she should leave him or whatever, their plans for the future, all that stuff. They go to a cave, and she says nobody's gonna find him here, but he says that they already did, which I would think is him saying, like, oh, they already got me. Like, they already got me with the sword, but because he didn't say who did that, it's just, like, a weird comment to make, because you're in a new location now, like, they didn't find you here, which is what she's talking about. She's not saying they will never find you, past or present, she's just saying in this moment you're safe. She says that they'll get medicine, things will get better, but he says he doesn't get very many parachutes, and then she leans in and kisses his cheek. And it all just feels kind of out of nowhere, where it's like, yes, we did get all of that in the book, but it felt like there was a lot more buildup where they're in this cave and they're talking about how are we going to survive this, and she's saying how she might get parachute, and then they talk about why one of them might be getting more parachutes than the other, or she feels like she needs to kiss him to get him to be quiet, but it's also part of this bigger performance, whereas I feel like the performance isn't really leaned into as much in the movie because obviously you can't get into her head, so you can only know so much about what is an act, but it just feels so abrupt. And then we see also District 12, we can see Gale watching this happening on the big screen, and he looks upset because of course the movie's playing into the whole love triangle thing. And then Katniss goes outside where she sees a sponsor package and a note that says, "You call that a kiss?" And that's very explicitly Haymitch saying, hey, you gotta play into this romance, which in the book she receives the soup instead of medicine for Peeta's leg, and she interprets that to mean that she needs to play up this romance some more. But in the movie, she's given a note that says explicitly, here's what you have to do to get better rewards. And it takes away so much depth from Katniss and Haymitch's understanding of each other, where it doesn't need to be in words. It's just something that they understand about each other. They just understand how the other person works. So to put a note in, yes, it helps the audience, but it takes away something from their relationship for sure. Katniss comes back in, they have some soup. Peeta is talking about when he threw the bread to Katniss way before, and he's feeling bad about the whole situation. He's saying, I wish I had just gone over and given it to you. Like, why did I throw the bread out into the rain for you? I should have just handed it to you. And he opens up a little bit about the first time that he noticed her, and she was singing this song, and she looked like this, but there's no specific age mentioned or anything, so we don't really know how long this has been going on, because in the flashback, when we're seeing Peeta throwing the bread, it's kind of hard to tell their ages because they look the same. And in the book, Peeta does still share this memory, but it's very clearly stated that it's like the first day of school ever, so you know that this romance has been going on a long time. Whereas in this, at least from what I heard, he didn't mention an age, so it's a bit harder to figure out the timeline of this relationship and how long Peeta might have been yearning for her. And also it's interesting that in the book, there's a lot more of a focus on how Katniss feels bad and feels like she owes people things, whereas in the movie, we're seeing Peeta feeling bad that he didn't do more to provide for her. And she doesn't really have anything to say about that. Claudius announces that at sunrise there's going to be a feast where there's something that everybody needs. She says that she's willing to risk her life to get this medicine for him, and says how he would do it for her if the roles were reversed. He asks why is she willing to do this, and again she just gives him a kiss and doesn't answer his questions. And Gale doesn't like this. Again, we see Gale just kind of pouting over it. And then, somehow this is more frustrating than the sleep medicine. He says he won't let her go. She says she'll stay. She curls up in bed and they fall asleep. He falls asleep. She is still awake. She watches him as he's still sick. He still seems to be getting worse with his fever or whatever. And then she just gets up and leaves for the cornucopia anyways. And it's like the stakes are a lot lower here because they've barely acknowledged the fever, they've barely acknowledged the leg wound. Like, sure, he's hurt, but they didn't say that it's fatal at this point, I don't think. And he also didn't threaten to do anything if she did go. So there's like, yes, they agreed to not do it, but he blindly trusted her the first time she said she wouldn't. So in the book, it's so fun that he has this threat. I mean, fun, I say very lightly, but fun that he is thinking about her and knows that she's gonna go behind his back to do this thing, and he's trying to threaten different ways to keep her there so that she doesn't put her life at risk. Whereas in the movie, he asks, don't go, and she says, yeah, okay, and then immediately betrays that, but also doesn't really do anything to prevent him from waking up, which doesn't matter because he didn't say he would do anything if he did wake up, because he just believed her the first time. Am I making sense? Do you see how there's just like a lack of depth with Peeta's character consistently in the movie? And I understand it because you only have so much time, and a lot of this stuff does come down to the small details. And then for the most part, this scene plays out the same as the book, where they run up, the table is already there, it doesn't rise out of the ground or anything, but it's sunrise. Foxface runs in, grabs her stuff, and leaves. Katniss goes up. She gets sliced above the eyebrow by Clove, but it's not as bad of a head injury. Cato is nowhere to be seen in this, and that's like the one thing I would say is majorly different, where he just doesn't show up. He doesn't see Clove getting attacked later, but Clove is holding Katniss down. Thresh hears what she's saying about Rue, and then rather than hitting her in the head with a big stone, he bashes her against the cornucopia until she dies. But then same thing where Thresh is telling Katniss, I'll save you just this once. He runs off. Katniss gets away. I don't really know what happens to the pack for Cato because it's not based on individual, it's based on district. So you have District 2 with Cato and Clove combined, I guess, Foxface, and then 11, and then 12. So I would assume Katniss got the one for 12 with the medication. Thresh probably got the one for 11. He had enough time to grab it and leave. Foxface obviously got hers, but then for District 2, I don't know if Clove got the District 2 pack before she started fighting Katniss. I don't know if Thresh had taken it and run off when he got his pack, and I don't know if maybe Cato showed up later and was able to take the pack if nobody else had taken it from the scene. Doesn't really end up mattering. We don't see what anybody else gets from this. But Katniss gets back to the cave. Peeta is upset that she left, but at the end of the day, he gets his medicine. He tries to say that she needs some for the cut on her head, but she says she's fine, which is silly because there's more than enough medicine to go around. Just put some on your head. But also, she already had this ointment for her burn, and I don't know if she went through all of that, so was that specifically burn cream, or would that have already healed them? Because in that case, what are we even doing? Like, in the book, I'm fairly certain that it was an injection that healed him because he had blood poisoning. This is more than just a cut on his leg. But in this, the fact that he's even able to offer her medicine means it's just another healing ointment that goes on the surface, so things really weren't as bad, I feel like. And then there's this really weird intimate moment where he's rubbing cream on her wound, on her head, and it's like, okay, I don't know if this is necessarily the romance that we're looking for, but go off, I guess. The game makers are invested in the romance, and that's what matters. And that brings us to the ending of the story. So, day 14-ish in the book. At this point, Peeta is healed, but Katniss passed out after her head wound, and now he's taking care of her as she recovers. And it started raining, so Peeta built a cover out of the piece of plastic that Katniss had grabbed on day 1 from the cornucopia. At this point, there are only a couple survivors remaining. We have Cato, Foxface, Peeta, Katniss, Thresh. And they talk a little bit about Thresh and owing people, like why he saved Katniss. And then they get into this whole conversation about the bread and why did Peeta throw it. And Peeta's kind of vague with his answers, and he mentions how Haymitch knows something or whatever. She's just lovable, and he doesn't say that, and she doesn't believe it. It's this whole thing that keeps being brought up from both Peeta and Haymitch, where she's just so easy to like, even though she's not necessarily likable, if that makes sense. People are just willing to root for her from the beginning, and she never feels that way, but it's happening time and time again. They have this sad back and forth about how they don't want anybody else to die and they want to go home, but also trying to do it in a way to where this conversation can still be safely broadcast, which it's for sure being monitored. So they're trying to say everything with this idea that they're being watched. She wakes up just in time for dinner, and they plan on going hunting the next day. And there are no tributes killed during this day. She eventually finds out where Thresh has been this entire game because we really haven't seen him at all, but Peeta says that he immediately went down to the field because we know that there was a lake on one side, forest on two sides, and then this cliff on the other. Thresh went down there, which is this giant field, and because he's from the agriculture district, he knows how to make his way around. Katniss observed that he looks better fed than he did before, and it's possible that he just is making a nice life for himself down there, and nobody really wants to risk going into his domain. It's still raining, so they're not able to go hunting, but Katniss is wishing that Haymitch would send some more food down, and knows that if she plays up the romance, they'll potentially get more resources, but she can't tell Peeta this because then the audience would know that it's an act, so she just has to play into what Haymitch wants and hopes that it gets them something. So they kiss, and they're holding each other all night, whatever. Day 15, it's still raining, they can't do anything, and they just kind of nap. She asks when he first got this crush as kind of a way for them to still be playing into this romance, even if they're not doing all that for the camera, and this is where he mentions that he first noticed her on the first day of school, and he remembered her hair, he remembered the song, he remembers all these details, which has her questioning if it's real or not. Up until this point, she thought that Peeta was just doing this whole act, but now she's realizing that, hey, these are actual details of her life, and maybe he actually does remember her from all those years ago, and she leans in for a kiss, which earns them another warm meal from Haymitch. They savor the meal, and they just have a nice chat, and she's secretly also thinking that she really likes this mutual understanding between her and Haymitch, where she knows what he's asking for. Again, he doesn't have to write it in a note, she just knows. It's the end of the night and they're looking up at the sky to see if anybody dies. Katniss thinks that nobody had that day. They hadn't heard any cannons or anything, and they're assuming everybody's just hiding out from the rain, but they see up on the screen that Thresh is out of the games. Somewhere during the day, he died off, and they have to assume that Cato did something. They didn't hear a cannon, and it's possible that maybe it was just masked by thunder from the rain or something like that, but we don't know what happened to him. He's just out of the games now. And with Thresh out of the games, Cato is most definitely searching for them again, so they're back on high alert. And then it's nighttime, Katniss is on watch, she's just looking out at the full moon because the clouds have parted, so she's looking up at the rain and she's reflecting on the last time she went hunting and thinking about how it's been roughly 2 weeks since the start of the game, which is cool. It's cool that she has this solid internal clock where she actually knows roughly how many days it's been, because that's around where my count is. And then she goes back to doubting Peeta's story and saying how he's so convincing, how he got everybody to believe that he's in love. And it's like, you just talked to him. You know that he has these intimate details of your early school life. So she's very back and forth on if she believes his story, which doesn't really make sense to me at this point because I don't know how he would have conjured up those details on the spot like that if it wasn't at least a little bit true. But they wake up on day 16, the sun is out again, so they're able to finally leave this cave and go hunting for food. His leg is still weak and her head is still not at 100%. She's bandaged up, she still can't hear that great, but they gotta do something, they gotta start moving. But the thing is, he is too loud, she can't hunt a thing. He's just walking too loud, he's dragging his leg, and in general, he doesn't really have the same forest senses that she does, so it's just not a great team, especially when she's used to working with Gale, who's very much on her level when it comes to hunting. But she wants to be polite, and she also doesn't want to have them split off, so she doesn't say anything, and she's just trying very hard to hunt even as all the animals are running away from them. He does eventually pick up on that and offers to forage while she goes hunting for real. She's a little bit worried about splitting off, but she says that they can still do the whistle to let the other person know that they're okay. But then as she's hunting, she does the signal and doesn't hear anything from him, so she gets worried, and she runs off to go and find him, but he's just by some running water and couldn't hear her. She is understandably scared in the situation because she just lost Rue from not being able to find each other, so she's just being overly cautious. But it's lucky because Katniss checks their pack and notices that some food is missing. And it's because Foxface was being sneaky and tried to take resources from them. Peeta says he didn't eat anything, and they realize that Foxface had been stealing from them, and because Peeta had mistakenly picked up some poisonous berries, they find a dead Foxface nearby. Peeta is initially caught off guard. He doesn't know what happened, and he thinks this must mean Cato is nearby and hunting them. But Katniss is like, hey, actually these berries that you have are nightlock, and if you eat them, you'll die immediately. So maybe it's for the best that she took them instead of you. And it probably just played out where Foxface assumed that if these tributes are taking the resources, they're probably safe to eat, and she didn't think anything of it. A tragic end for a very cool character, but Katniss decides to hold on to a couple of berries and says, hey, maybe Cato likes them. Maybe we can slip this guy some berries and then end it quickly. Because at this point, it's just the two of them and Cato from District 2 left. And then they have to get away from this location because the hovercraft would be coming to take the body away, which would immediately reveal to Cato where they are at. So they decide to cook really fast before they go, just because at this point, it's gonna reveal their location so they can set a little fire as a treat. So they get as much food as they can and then they head out. And she wants to hide in a tree for the night. She wants to feel the security that she felt in the early days, but he asks if they can return to the cave, and after the long day of hunting that they had, she agrees to go with him on this one, and they go back to the cave. They have their food, they sleep, and Katniss gives him a genuine kiss on the forehead because she's just happy to not be in this alone. She's happy to have a partner for the end of this battle. That brings us to day 17. It's around midday when they wake up, and there's still no activity from Cato. They still don't know where he's at or what he's doing. So they fuel up, they get ready, and they have this feeling in their bones that today is probably gonna be the day. They know that the game makers are gonna do something to push it together because this is the final fight. They head down to the stream to wash up and to fully get ready for the day, but they find out that the water is gone. It's just fully dried up. That water source that we mentioned at the start, the lake that's by the cornucopia, is almost definitely the only source of water in the arena now, so they have no choice but to head there for a final battle. They get down to the lake and they wait for most of the day, but Cato still hasn't shown up. And when he does show up, he comes in very strong and he's running straight at them, but when Katniss tries to shoot him with an arrow, it bounces off. So there's some weird stuff going on here. But initially, it looked like he was running towards them, and then when he gets closer, he just runs straight past. He doesn't try to attack them or anything. And that lets them know that maybe he's not running at them, but he's running away from something else. So Katniss and Peeta get up and they start running too, because these giant dog-like creatures are now running out of the forest straight at them. Roughly half a dozen of these mutts, or mutations from the capital, show up out of the woods, and the trio run to the cornucopia for safety and climb on top of it. Peeta is still running a lot slower because of his leg, but they end up all getting to the top to safety before these wolf-ish creatures get to them. And they're kind of like wolves, but they can also stand on their back legs, and they also all have different types of coat. Some of them have black and curly fur, some of them have blonde fur, and they have 4-inch long nails and big snuffly snouts, whatever that means. Interpret it how you will, it certainly isn't pleasant. While they're up on the cornucopia, one of the mutts launches up and Katniss gets a closer look and realizes that this mutt has the same green eyes as Glimmer from District 1. And not only that, but a collar that's labeled number 1, and also the same blonde hair. And Katniss has the horrifying realization that maybe these mutts are the tributes? Either they're heavily inspired by the tributes that have fallen, or these somehow are the tributes. And at that point, you have to wonder just how much of them is the tributes, because is it just their features? Do they just have the same human eyes and the same human hair? Or does it go beyond that? Do they possibly have the same human brains? Do these mutts have the same thoughts as the tributes? And maybe that's why they're running so aggressively at the survivors, because they didn't get the chance to win. Is their rage personal because they were taken down by these potential victors? It is a brutal thing to think, and it is such a beautiful way to show how messed up the capital can be. The mutts are trying to jump up onto the cornucopia as the two from District 12 are fighting Cato, and it ends up with Peeta being in a headlock. Peeta is still pretty injured on his leg, not even so much from the slice earlier from Cato, but from a mutt biting his leg as he was trying to get up onto the cornucopia, so he's already unwell. But Cato is holding on to him and says, "Hey Katniss, like, you can try to shoot me, you can try to take me down, but if I fall, I'm taking this guy with me. But you also have to do something or else I'm just gonna kill him anyways." And as this is all going down, Katniss realizes that the thing that blocked her arrow earlier, and probably the thing that Cato received in the feast, is this full body armor from the neck down where nothing can hurt him. So she can shoot at his face, and that's about it. And the rest of his body is covered in this skin-tight protection where nothing can get to him. But as Peeta is standing there, he's in this headlock, he's able to move his hand just enough to mark an X on Cato's hand, which is holding him, and that is a signal to let Katniss know, hey, shoot him here, because I guess he's also not protected on his hands, so Katniss is able to take the shot at Cato's hand, and that releases his grip on Peeta, and then he ends up falling off of the cornucopia while Peeta gets away. But the unfortunate thing is now Cato has fallen down to these really aggressive mutts, and he's wearing almost full body armor, and nothing can seem to hurt him. So they have to listen to over an hour, it says, of Cato versus the mutts, where he's on the ground, he's protected, but he's not really able to fight back because it's a lot of things that are a lot more powerful than him. And as night falls, there is still no cannon. He is still alive down there, but things are not going well. The mutts at this point have dragged him inside the cornucopia, so Katniss and Peeta can't see what's happening. They're still on top. They're risk going down and getting in the mutts' way, but they also know that the battle isn't over because they can hear Cato inside. Katniss tries to patch up Peeta's leg wound as best as she can, and then they share a jacket together on top of the cornucopia as they wait for the games to finish. And Katniss describes this as being the worst hours of her life, which is a lot considering what she's been through in the past 2 weeks. They're up on the cornucopia, and it says they're just listening to sad Cato sounds from inside, and it seems like the mutts are keeping him alive for entertainment at this point. Typically, during the games, you like to see the contestants killing each other off, so it's not as fun if the games end with the mutts taking out one of the final contestants. Why end the games when you could make them last just a little bit longer, right? The sun rises on day 18, and they realize that Cato has been dragged to the mouth of the cornucopia to where they might be able to put him out of his misery. They might be able to have a mercy shot at him. Katniss shoots at what is described as the raw hunk of meat that is Cato, and a cannon goes off, which should signal their victory. The Mutts all run away, but there's no victory sound. There's no final end to the games. They're not being taken away. Nothing is happening. And they don't know how to handle this, so they come together, Katniss and Peeta, and they say, well, maybe we just have to get away from the body. Like, maybe once it's taken away, we'll be declared winners, or something like that. They get as far away as the lake, and they see the hovercraft take Cato's body away, but they're still not the winners. The game is still not over. And then there's another announcement through the speakers or wherever it comes from that says that actually the rule has been revoked. Specifically, it says, greetings to the final contestants of the 74th Hunger Games. The earlier revision has been revoked. Closer examination of the rulebook has disclosed that only one winner may be allowed. Good luck, and may the odds be ever in your favor. And that's all they get. And of course, they're disappointed, but they're not necessarily surprised, because at the end of the day, it was just a fun little thing that the Capitol threw in to have a more exciting game. Peeta goes to grab his knife, and Katniss reacts immediately and pulls out her bow at him, but he was really just throwing his weapon away. He wasn't trying to fight her, and he says, you should win, like, just do what you have to do, take me out of here, you deserve to go home. He wants her to win, and also he doesn't want to drag this out until something happens where one of them has to go out like Cato did. He'd rather it just be done with here. But the thing is, Katniss is also reflecting on this, and she realizes it would be easier to die here than to go home knowing that she had taken his life. So they're kind of at this standstill where neither of them wants to kill the other one. But then Peeta does a very similar thing to what he threatened when they're in the cave. He just takes the bandage off of his leg that's been holding back his bleeding wound. So now it's like if Katniss doesn't take action, he's going to bleed out. So there's not a lot of options right now for her. And it's the same thing as him threatening to come out and chase her down and start yelling so that he's hunted if she goes to the feast. It's like there's so much personality with this character, and it's funny in a really morbid way. Peeta says they both know that the Capitol has to have a victor, but she says, well, actually, hold on a second. Maybe they don't. They pull out the berries, and she proposes that they just don't need a winner at all, so they can both eat the berries on 3, and then there's nobody. They both get to 3, put the berries in their mouths, and then they're stopped, and they're both announced as victors of the games. And it's this really bittersweet feeling where, I mean, it kind of seems like they both want this to be how they go out. Like, this in itself would be a noble death. And now they win, but now they have to live the rest of their lives still doing the same thing every year and still supervising it. Versus if they had followed through with this plan and they had proved to the Capitol that you don't get your victor, maybe that in itself would have been enough of a statement, but that isn't what ends up happening. They are stopped, they're both declared the victors, and then a hovercraft comes in and takes them away, and Peeta is immediately taken off to medical because he's bleeding out, he's not doing well. A hovercraft brings them to the training center, Katniss is sedated, they're all getting cleaned and healed up, and when she wakes up, she can actually hear. That's how good their healing abilities are. She is fully fixed top to bottom. The Avox girl that she was familiar with tells her that Peeta did survive, so they're both chillin'. And Katniss describes how after the games, there's usually a couple of days where the contestants can clean themselves up and get ready, and then they'll do interviews, they'll talk about the games, and they'll kind of do a tour around the districts to celebrate their victory. But until then, they're fed, they're sedated, they're just kept nice and clean. At the end of the day, they won. And she's excited to go home, she's excited to see her family, she's excited to see how District 12 is going to react to a victor after around 30 years of not having a winner. She reunites with her team, Effie, Cinna, and Haymitch, and she ends up going in for a hug, and he calls her sweetheart, which in the beginning was this annoying nickname that he gave, and it seemed kind of condescending, but now it seems really genuine, and it seems like they just really get along, because obviously they have this unspoken connection where she's understanding the messages that he's trying to say, and he's proud that she won, and it's a really sweet relationship that grows throughout the series. And they explain that Peeta is being kept somewhere separate so that their reunion can be aired when they have their interviews later. She meets up with her prep team and they get her ready, but the whole time they're talking about the games as if it's just fun reality TV show that they watch, so she has to tune them out. She cannot listen to them because it's so detached from the experience that she just had to live through. And then Cinna shows up with this nice, cute yellow dress, which exaggerates her features, but in a way that makes her look a lot younger. It accentuates certain features that the Capitol wanted to modify while she was healing up after the games, because typically they want you to look your very best. So they'll go ahead and do whatever they want to your body, but Cinna fought back, said keep her all natural, don't go changing anything that she doesn't want. Instead, they gave her a dress that accentuates certain features while still making her look innocent, like she's 14 at the oldest instead of 16, which she is. She's got a headband on, she has soft, like, natural style nails, she just looks very young. And it's clear that Cinna has some strategy while he's setting her up like this, but he can't say it in this moment. And then they're getting ready to go on stage for these big final interviews, getting introduced to the Capitol after the games, and while they're being lifted up onto the stage, Haymitch pulls Katniss aside into this big hug, but while they're close, he whispers in her ear that she's in pretty big trouble with the Capitol because she embarrassed them, and they don't like that. He warns her that she needs to lean into the strategy of being so madly in love that she would do anything to save this person. She can't imagine living without him, and that's why she acted the way that she did, because if there's any hint of rebellion in her, if she comes across the wrong way at all, they're gonna get her. But Haymitch also says that Peeta doesn't need any coaching on this because he's already there. He's already got that mindset, which she's a little confused by. And it's like, come on, girl, get the memo. The guy is into you, and you have been acting this whole time. It's not offensive. It's not like they think you're so dumb that you can't play into it. But it's that it's not an act for him. She had hoped that once the games were over, she would feel safer, like maybe the danger is now past, but instead, she is in more danger than ever. If she is a target that the Capitol is now watching, they can do some serious harm to her, because it's not a game. Anything in the real world can now be taken away from her. And so we learn that Cinna is dressing her to be looking as innocent as possible so that she can lean into this whole performance a little bit more. But she's very conflicted on all of this because she, even from before the games, has never really considered her own feelings because, we know from the start that she didn't feel any type of romantic way towards Gale. That was very much just, we work together and we're close, and that's where it kind of stops. And she knew of Peeta, but she wasn't super close to him either. She remembers this moment fondly, but she didn't really have any romantic feelings towards him either, and then they're in the games and they're playing up this whole romance together. But everything has been so constant that she hasn't given herself the time to consider her own feelings, so now, when she's being forced to perform it, or else she might have everything taken away, she's really in a tricky spot to navigate those feelings. But they go out for the interview, Caesar does the introductions, they sit together on a love seat and have their little talk or whatever, and they sit together on a love seat for a 3-hour mandatory viewing of a compilation of the games that highlights the relationship that they have, and it sort of helps the defense that Katniss is trying to build for why she acted the way that she did, but it's also just a really rough thing to have to sit through. Snow shows up to congratulate the victors, and typically they have one crown that the victor would wear, but because there's two, he splits the crown in half and puts half on each of their heads. But when she looks into his eyes, he looks unforgiving like a snake, and she knows that really, even though they both pulled this stunt, she's the one to blame. She's the one that he is mad at. And then the victors head to Snow's mansion. They have a victory banquet. They're doing all this celebratory stuff, but the entire time, Katniss and Peeta are really not able to talk privately. They're very much still together in public. They have to be seen as a couple, but they're never given any time to talk to each other, and Haymitch says, you're gonna have plenty of time to talk together when we're not here. Another day, they're going to do interviews. Cinna gives her a white dress and pink shoes, so again, it's kind of a more girlish look. And Katniss feels like she's constantly being observed. Again, she's not able to see Peeta alone at all. He also feels like they're being kept apart, but they don't really know what's going on. During the interview, Katniss finds out that from the mutt attack and from the leg injury, Peeta now has a metal leg. They're asked about the berries in an interview, and she plays along. She says that she couldn't bear living without him. Peeta agrees, and after the interview, Haymitch says that that was the perfect response. And then they get on the train home. They say bye to Cinna and Portia, and they go back to the District 12 Victor community place, whatever it's called. I'm sorry, it's 1 a.m, you'll have to forgive me. Haymitch and Effie ride the train back home with them, and Katniss is still trying to navigate her more complicated feelings about Peeta, and again, now she's going home to see Gale, so there's another layer on top of everything where she doesn't really know how to act around him after everything that's gone down. But as they get closer to home, she starts to feel less comfortable around Peeta, who she's grown so close to. So it's a really weird time. She's gonna have to navigate all of these feelings. And then as they get ready to exit the train to step out and see District 12 for the first time since winning, Peeta holds out his hand to her and says, "One more time for the audience." And Katniss is worried that she's already starting to lose him. And that's the end of the Hunger Games. So lots of big, complicated feelings there, lots of personal relationship stuff to work through, and also the looming threat of the Capitol potentially taking things out on them for making them look like everything's an embarrassment, for making a joke out of the games, for making it seem like they get to control the narrative. And then really quickly, to get to the end of the Hunger Games movie, because again, this part moves kind of fast, this is roughly day 10 in the movie, but it's after they already went to the feast, they got the medicine, Katniss and Peeta are both healed up and ready for a final battle. At this point, there are 5 people left in the games. It's Cato, Foxface, Thresh, and then the 2 of them, and they wake up, they decide it's time to go hunting. Thresh could be anywhere, Cato is probably by the cornucopia, and then Foxface, again, could be anywhere. They're kind of just blindly navigating the arena in hopes that they can not run into anybody, because these are some strong competitors that they're up against. Katniss says they'll go hunt, and Peeta makes a joke at her, and is like, oh, cool, I'll take the bow. And it's like, I don't know that you guys are on that level yet. It's a very odd thing to throw in here. And I guess you guys are getting cozy in the cave throughout this time that you've been together, but it just feels kind of out of place to me. But Peeta goes to find some berries, and Katniss goes hunting, and then while they're separated, a cannon goes off, and we see Katniss start to freak out because she thinks that maybe it was Peeta that just died somehow, so she runs off to find him, and she sees berries sitting on a jacket in the middle of the forest. She sees Peeta holding berries, and she runs over and asks what he's doing because that's Nightlock and it's deadly and he can't be doing that, and she's so worried for him and all this stuff. And then they find Foxface's body with the berries, and he says he didn't even know that Foxface was following, but Katniss says, well, yeah, she's, like, really good at that. Like, that's her whole thing. Again, she probably just assumed that because somebody else was harvesting them that they're safe, and she went for it, and that was the end of her. And that's where there's some discussion about what she was training in the very early part of the training center, because it seems like she's playing this game where you either match things up or you identify things. And for a while I saw a post going around where people were saying that she is really good at identifying plants, and so when she dies by poisonous berries, it's intentional, and that she, I guess, chose this time to end it all for some reason. But then I looked into it a little bit more, and there's a lot of people arguing back and saying, well, actually, it seems more likely that she was doing some sort of memory or matching game in the training center, and so it was just a way to show off how quick she is at thinking, and it has nothing to do with the actual plants that were being matched up, which would make a lot more sense with everything that we know about her as a character, so I would like to believe it's that. But regardless of if she meant to or not, she is now out of the game, so we have Foxface gone. That leaves just Cato, Thresh, Peeta, and Katniss. And again, Katniss grabs some berries in case Cato wants some. And then, despite them establishing that it's around noon, the sun starts to go down, and they acknowledge that time isn't really real in the arena because the game makers can manipulate the environment, so they turned it to be nighttime. They're kind of signaling that the end of the game is coming. And then we see Seneca overseeing the rest of the game makers as they, like, 3D print a big dog into the world. And as soon as they're done building this thing and sending it out into the arena, you can hear dogs barking. And Katniss and Peeta say, oh, this is the finale of the games, before a cannon goes off to signal the death of Thresh, which for some reason his projection goes up straight after the cannon, so I don't know if it was just really good timing and it happened to be nighttime just in time to show that he's the one that got out. And there's also no anthem that plays when his picture is shown, so I don't know what that's all about. Katniss kind of makes a sad face when she realizes that his Thresh had died, but Peeta doesn't question it, whereas in the book, they do have a bit of a talk about how Thresh didn't want to owe her and all of that. And then the dogs are all the same looking. They're all these big black dogs, but they end up chasing Peeta and Katniss to the cornucopia, which in the movie, Peeta runs faster than Katniss and makes it there before her, but stops to help give her a boost. So I guess that medicine really worked wonders. His legs, I mean, I can't believe how well they work now. But they both get up onto the cornucopia and find out that Cato was already standing on top of it. So they immediately, the 3 of them, start fighting. It ends up in the same situation where Peeta is in a chokehold. And then Cato says something really interesting. He says that he's dead anyway, it doesn't matter, she might as well shoot him and take them both down. He says he was always gonna die and that's what they want. And I think it's really interesting to get that perspective from somebody who grew up training to win the games and who spent his whole life to be part of this. And he knows he's a piece of it from the very beginning. But then in his final moments, he's challenging the Capitol, it seems like. And it's such a critical moment that it has to be broadcast around, so I have to wonder what this means for the story, right? Like, this is a lot more impactful than really anything else we've seen to have somebody from one of the major districts questioning all of it. He says Katniss can't shoot him because then he'll take Peeta down, but also he could just snap Peeta's neck right now because all he knows how to do is bring pride to his district. All he knows how to do is fight in these games, but then he says not that it matters, and it's just such an interesting thing to add to this character. And I actually really like it because they gave Cato a little bit more depth, and it's just, I mean, I'm not usually for random changes like that, but it's never done well, and I feel like this is. Because now I'm interested. I want to know more about him. In the book, the people from the career districts seem typically really shallow and like they're so focused on aesthetics and they're so overly confident and you don't really get to know anything about them because they all go out so strong. So to have this moment of weakness where he's openly criticizing and questioning all of it, I think it's a really cool thing to add to the end of this movie. But it ends in a very similar way where Peeta motions for Katniss to shoot at Cato's hand. He doesn't have the body armor that we saw in the book, so I don't know what he got, if anything, from the fight. Again, that's assuming that he even got a bag, depending on if Clove or if Thresh or whoever grabbed it. But he gets shot in his hand and he falls and he is immediately taken down by the dogs. There is no day-long waiting for him and hearing him through the night or anything like that. Katniss is able to pretty much immediately mercy kill him and then the pair hugs because they won, yay! As the sun rises on day 11 of the games, they hop down from the cornucopia, they wonder why nothing's happening, the rule is taken back, and they look at each other really, really sadly, and there's no indication that they're going for the weapons. There's no immediate reaction, which I would think there would be, because every time I played Minecraft Hunger Games with one of my friends and we were a team, at the very second when it became the two of us against each other, I was fighting them. I would stab them in the back every time. I did not care. So the fact that there's no caution here when that's announced, neither of them look to each other as a threat. It's an interesting way to approach this ending, I think, because it does show that they trust each other or that they've given up, or I don't know. Depends on how you interpret their looks, but neither of them are ready to fight the other person, which says a lot. They look at each other really sadly. Peeta says they have to have their victor. Katniss questions why do they, and then pulls out the berries. Little detail, but as they're counting to 3, Peeta only has eyes for Katniss. He does not change where he's looking, but she looks up at the sky or at the cameras, probably. They get to 3, but before they put the berries in their mouths, they are stopped. They're both declared victors. A hovercraft comes to get them, and then it fades to black. And then the ending of this movie, this is the part that I feel like just goes so fast. They end the games, it fades to black, all of a sudden it's Katniss and Haymitch up on a roof. For some reason, every time Katniss is in the Capitol, she only wears this one yellow shirt, and it's still holding true in this scene. Surely you have an entire wardrobe, why are we just wearing this one shirt? But Haymitch is giving her the same warning, saying that the Capitol isn't happy because she showed them up, and it's an issue for more than just her. This is going to affect other people. And then we have one of the coolest scenes I've ever watched in my life. I had to watch it maybe 4 or 5 times while I was doing this. I had to just keep replaying it because I think it is, oh my gosh, so good. If you have never seen this movie, watch it just for this scene and then watch this scene again. Like, that's seriously how good it is, because you get Seneca Crane, the game maker, who chose to listen to Haymitch and who chose to lean into the lovers instead of shutting down the underdog. And Seneca in the Capitol is led to this private room and locked inside, and there's just a single bowl in the middle of the room with a bunch of poisonous berries. And the way the music builds and the way that it just pans down to this bowl and then immediately cuts to Caesar at the show, it is the most perfect thing I've ever seen. The way that he's being forced to face the consequences of believing in this story, and then the juxtaposition between that and the Capitol and how they're choosing to celebrate the victors, and it's just, it is such a beautiful thing. They're announced as victors. Snow goes up to give the crown. Instead of splitting it, he just puts one on Katniss's head, which, rude. Peeta is also a winner, but Snow congratulates her for winning. He sees the Mockingjay pin that she has, and then on the train home, Peeta is like, okay, well, what do we do now? And she says, we try to forget. And then they get up, they smile and wave in front of their people, and she's happy because she gets to see her family. She sees her mom and Prim and Gale all looking out from the audience. Peeta holds her hand, and they raise it up together, and things are just relatively happy and hopeful. And then the last thing we see is Snow overlooking the game maker room, and then he turns around and he walks out and he's just plotting his evil things. And yes, I think it's a really beautiful end to this movie, and I think Overall, this movie is done so well, but I do feel like this ending is so fast because the games end and all of a sudden the movie's over, and I wish we had maybe 10 more minutes, not even, to just fit them back into real life, to have just a little bit to sit with the threat that is the entire capital, which I guess having it more tense like this, it makes you want another movie because you know that something is brewing, but I wish we had just a little bit longer to see everybody again after the games are done. Maybe even just a little bit more of them in an interview or something, because they had multiple times where they were up on stage in the book, some in front of an audience and some just for the cameras, so I wish we had seen a little bit more of them talking together. But as like genuinely watching this movie, without comparing it to the book, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. So it's not even that deep of a criticism, if you could even call it a criticism. It's just a thought that I had because the book has a little bit more of time with them in the capital before they go back home, but I'm not even really missing it from the movie, so it is what it is. Overall, really cool book, really big themes, really important story, I think. Very relevant in a very scary way, and I think the movie does it so well. Of course, there are little changes, but it almost always makes sense. And that's all I got for today. So if you like this video, let me know. Thank you for sitting with me on this journey. If you would like to see me talking about the other two books, the Catching Fire book and then Mockingjay, let me know. I did not expect to spend 6 hours recording this, but I mean, I love this story so much, so I do not regret spending the time to talk about it, and I definitely will dive back into the story if that's something you want to see. That's all I got for right now, so if you like my face and you want to see more of it, you can subscribe to this channel, or you can subscribe to my other channel, Riverbend, where I post music content, sometimes, occasionally, if you're lucky. I'm sure I'll see you around very soon with another video. Thank you! Good night, going to bed now, see you later.